Calling all units, calling all units. Donut shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.
And we're back. 0 to 100.
Yeah, I see that.
Welcome back to the Donut Shop Podcast, where we broadcast from Feds Apparel Studio. That's
Yes.
right, Feds Apparel Studio. For all your uniform needs, go to fedsapparel.com, get your uniforms there, and you could even get some of my merch. Justin, did you know that?
Yes, you have.
I got merch.
Nick
I don't have
merch.
any. I don't have any here.
Is it for sale?
It is for sale.
Beautiful
But
thing.
here's the thing. I don't have any here in the actual building.
Yeah.
It's all online in cyberspace.
Right.
But it gets printed right back in that area.
It does get printed back there. Huge print shop back there. But anyways, welcome back to the podcast. Very special episode. We have a special guest, someone who's running for sheriff. And that's a very unique because this is going to be the first time we have an elected sheriff in about
60 years.
60 years. So the gentleman who just spoke, if you're in radio land, he goes by the name of Mario Knapp. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Or
Welcome,
should I
welcome.
say future sheriff? Are you going to wear the hat?
If things go right, I don't know. I don't think the hat matches me.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering. I was going to tell you to bring like at least your trooper hat to be like.
I would
are
have
we
worn
wearing-
it for a picture. For
Are,
sure.
are we
Yeah.
wearing hats? We're wearing
yeah.
hats. I got my trooper hat.
Well, anyways,
I could have worn my cowboy. I have a cowboy hat.
we wanted to bring you on the show, give you an opportunity to just explain what's going on. What are your plans for the future? We even might throw some scenarios your way so that you can give your take on how you would approach these scenarios and how you would mitigate some of this stuff. And it goes with everything that we're seeing in today's media. And I'm sure if you become, or when you become a sheriff, that you're going to have to face this stuff sometime.
Definitely.
So it's going to be awesome to hear. You also have an extensive background in law enforcement. We spoke off camera before, and I was like, hey, when you said that you were a RID instructor, or you were captain of RID? Commander of the RID unit.
What's RID?
RID is a robbery intervention detail. It's
Very good.
It's and you don't have to say it, but it's a badass unit for the Miami-Dade County Police Department, and we have a unit similar, which is the tactical robbery unit, which mirrors that unit, and I was a part of it. So we worked very closely with RID. Matter of fact, I was the guy on our crew that had we had two radios, the city radio, and then we had the county radio, and we monitored what RID was doing. Vice versa, they had one of our radios. But anyways, in order to go to RID, you have to go through. Essentially, it's like if you go to SWAT, you have to go to SWAT school. If you're rapid deployment RDF, which was the F for?
Rapid Deployment Force.
There it is, force.
Yeah, for field force.
Field force, yeah. You got to go to RDF school. And if you go to True or RID, you have to go to RID school, which is, it's pretty high speed. It's very intense. And it's good.
It's probably the most volatile crime suppression initiative in Dade County.
Yeah, it's really,
Most high profile, to say the least.
yes. And you said, and I went, you're him. You had a great lesson. Maybe we'll get into it later in the podcast, but you had a great lesson. It stuck with me that I actually stole.
Right.
And I didn't know that it was you back then. So I was like, I learned this in RID school. Okay, I'm going to teach you guys some stuff. And it was a great lesson that you taught. And I passed it on in the police academy when I was there teaching. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Passing
I've
down that
always
knowledge.
said, I've been teaching for a long time, and I always say that the definition of a good instructor is someone who's a good plagiarist. We don't make it up on our own.
No.
You learn as you go, and you regurgitate it.
Yeah, and you tweak a little here and there. Yeah. So, well, anyways, let's get into some of the stuff. Let's learn about you. Let's talk about you. So,
Well, first, can I just really quick, because I know we spoke about it earlier, but I want to just take this opportunity to tell you that I've been following you for a long time. I think you do an awesome job. For a little while there, I acted as the chief of Public Information and Education Bureau for Dade County, so for media relations. And I got to be honest, we always looked at what you were doing.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think you do a good job. You do an awesome job, actually. The creativity that you guys have over there, and especially, I mean, I got to tell you, my favorite one was the Bob Ross.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw that, and I've seen it several times.
Yeah.
And every time I made reference to what I thought was a good and successful media program,
Yes.
I always pointed to you. So congratulations. I think you're doing an awesome job.
Thank you for that, sir. Real quick, since you mentioned it, I can just back it up real quick and tell you how that came about. And it was we got tasked to do the Art Basel, and so Art Basel is the largest art festival that comes to Miami and takes over the entire city. And there's a whole bunch of pop-up expos. But long story short, we got tasked to do the safety measures. If you're coming to Art Basel, this is what you should look for: road closures, et cetera, et cetera. We already did it the year before, so we say, hey, did anything change? No, let's just post the one we did because we were working on something. And it's like, no, you need to do a new one.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm in the shower. I'm like, what can I do? Kind of like, oh, you want me to do a new one? I'm going to go all out. So we went to a wig store in Alapata the next morning. I bought it. So in the shower, I'm like, Bob Ross. They're getting Bob Ross.
who's the most famous artist I know?
Exactly.
Because I actually thought, and I go, how many of the young guys know who Bob Ross is? I used to watch him.
Yeah.
Like for hours, just sit there and watch him. But I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. So we actually got a no. Are you crazy? And we're like,
Yes.
this is what's happening.
Right.
So, and then there was somebody in like before the top that was over us, and they were like, all right, this is your one that I'm trusting you. If it goes south, it's on you guys. And we're like, we'll take it. And then, it went good. We got shared everywhere within that community. People loved it, and it was very well received. And look, we're talking about it today.
Right.
And if it's true, then if you've been following me, you know, because that's not a big one in the library where like the Running Man or something. Somebody always says something like that. But Bob Russell, thanks for that.
I thought it was awesome.
And but to go back because you're going to be sheriff soon. That goes with the leadership and allowing and having faith in us to do, because we have done stuff, and there's always a ceiling that gets raised and the trust that is built. So the leadership at that time was like, all right, I trust you guys, so do it. And then we've been very successful, and that, I believe that's a big reason why we're able to be successful, is because the trust that we have, and there's not a lot of red tape.
Yeah, I agree. I think even throughout my career, where I found myself doing the most important work was when I was given the liberty to do the work.
Yes.
So tell me what to do, don't tell me how to do it.
Ah,
You know, and I've always felt that way, and I think that it resonates with people. When you give people the responsibility and you give them ownership, I think they're going to do a much better job, because nobody wants to fail.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and especially when they know that if they fail, they're going to make the person that gave them the opportunity look bad. So people work. You know, it's more intrinsic.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
And in turn, that person who allowed that person to work will get the shine, because their subordinate did a great job.
Right.
So, well, thanks for that. Justin, how long have you been following? No, I was kidding. Actually, Justin was at
I was going to call you a name.
Justin was at a training.
Yeah.
And we're not going to say what training, and they had mentioned me.
Yeah, they said Nick was a diva.
They said I was a
But,
diva. And I was like, really?
I disagree. I disagreed in front of the whole class.
He stood up for me, so thanks for that, Justin.
It's not true.
Yeah, it was let's just say it was a very big, probably one of the biggest agencies in the nation.
Right. Yeah, but you can't.
And they called me out.
You can't hold the floor and without. What happened? What was it?
No, it was just they were giving explanation about about different varieties of how to do public information and social media work and stuff like that. And it was said, like, but you don't always have to be like Nick from Miami. He's kind of a diva. And I was like,
right.
Objection.
Yeah.
I
know the guy.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I know the guy. You want him? He's actually on my favorites. You can.
Right.
I can call him right now if you want to FaceTime him and have a conversation. We can.
That's all.
Go on.
There was a little bit of like,
Yeah.
A little bit. But no. Hey, listen. All good. Hey, what is it?
Water under the bridge?
No. Yeah, you're in the news. Or if they're talking about you, just let them keep talking. It means you're doing something.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, anyways, let's start talking about you, sir. Enough about me. This is not about me. This is about you. So, born and raised in Miami?
Born and raised in Miami, Jackson Memorial Hospital.
Hey.
1973, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I did elementary school here. Then I did some elementary school in Washington Heights, New York.
Okay.
I was raised by a single mom and dad. Single mom and grandmother, who I referred to as my dad.
Okay.
And we lived in New York for 6 or 7 years. and then came back down to Miami, graduated from Coral Gables Senior High.
All right. So you got a little bit of taste of up there and like, I'm out.
Right. No, actually, I loved it. You know, when you're a kid, you grow up anywhere. We didn't know.
That's true.
We really didn't know how broke we were.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because that's when kids actually played in the street.
That's what I was going to ask you. So where in New York?
Washington Heights.
Washington Heights. So you were. I've been back to New York. I don't know, a couple years ago. I would frequent there every year. Go there in the summers, and we played stickball. Matter of fact, you're talking about playing in the streets,
Right.
And in New York, everyone is out in the streets playing some kind of something.
Yeah.
You feel like you're in a time capsule. There's hopscotch, there's handball, stickball, you name it. They're out there doing it.
Well, you know those milk crates, right? Like Velda Farms, those plastic milk crates.
Yeah.
We would tie that up to something, and that was our basketball.
Right,
team.
Basketball.
right.
Like
Basketball
you made do, and you know I tell people this all the time. I got my Christmas gifts from what was back then the dollar store. Mm-hmm. I had no clue.
That was the best.
We had no clue. We were happy kids. We were out on the street. We were broke but didn't know it.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
was the best.
Yeah. As long as you could have fun.
And I used to flip candy from the dollar store. You buy some
yeah.
candy at the dollar store,
yeah.
bring it in a little Publix bag to school. What you want, man? And then I would sell candy.
They did that.
Yeah,
They did. I
yeah.
remember them doing that. People would sell now and laters.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah. And you
Remember
break
that?
apart the pack and you sell them as individuals and stuff.
And pixie sticks were real. I was selling that powder on the playground. So, but anyways,
Yeah.
So came back to Miami, and then what happens after that? I know you joined law enforcement, but was there anything in between? Any jobs? Any odd jobs? You know?
Yeah, I did. I was a photographer at the Sears photo studio for a little while.
Hey, so
I
you
worked-
did the poses where they're really turned.
Oh,
to
it
the
was
side?
corny. It was
Yeah.
corny. It was really bad, but it was what was popular back then.
Of course.
And then after that, I worked at I actually worked at Midway Ford. Right on Flagler there.
Yeah.
I worked there at the parts department. Did that for about a year and a half. But I knew I wanted to be a cop. That was all during the process of the police department, and then finally was lucky enough to get hired. And my brother and I actually are the first two brothers in the Miami-Dade Police Department that were hired and went to the same academy class.
Ooh, so you got
same
special
time.
treatment.
Oh, it was embarrassing. Well, so what we did was, they lined us up.
Yeah.
And we were gophers for like 4 months. So that means we already got a heads up of what to expect in the academy.
Yeah.
And I remember he went all the way to the left and I went all the way to the right, thinking, just don't cause attention. And the moment the TAs came, where are the two Knapp brothers?
Yep.
And he raised his hand. I was trying to hide mine. And finally they it was embarrassing. They made us hold hands for like the first week of the academy. Here we are double timing everywhere. We're holding hands. They're like, hey, they told my brother Willie, they're like, you got to take care of your brother since you're in the same academy class.
Oh, he's the older?
He's older than me.
There you go.
Well, and it's not a name that you can have names on the back of your shirts and be two Fernandezes next to each other and of no relation that you can play it off.
You guys look similar?
But they knew they looked
already-
for us.
yeah.
They were walking
Yeah.
towards us looking for us.
Oh,
do
man.
you guys look similar?
No. He's got more hair and all the looks, and I don't know what I got.
So we do research. I was taught at the academy and been through the academy, so they know. One of the first questions is, does anybody have any family members here?
Right.
Raise your hand if you have a family member, and you're like, I got this. My cousin. Oh yeah. Oh, your cousin. So you want the special treatment? We're gonna give you special treatment.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the worst thing. That was the heads up. It's like, you don't know me. Don't say you know me.
Yeah.
And never ever go into the SWAT locker. Those are the things I can tell you to do.
Right.
So go in the SWAT locker room and don't
Never
tell
ever
me.
go into the SWAT locker. So
Yeah.
all right. So you real quick. I know you just said you worked at Midway Ford. You a car guy? Or-
No, believe it or not, I've never been a car guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you become a police officer.
Yes.
And what year was that?
So I got hired in 94 and I got out of the academy. I want to say it was 95. My timelines are pretty bad.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't remember the year I became a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain. I don't
It's all
remember anything.
documented somewhere.
Yeah,
so
it's
it's okay.
somewhere.
Yeah, you don't
It's
have to really
verifiable.
remember.
I was trying to get your tenure. Like, how long were you police? How were you a law enforcement officer?
27 years, just shy. Well, let me. It was 26 years and 11 months. So I got to make sure, but 27 years. I was
20,
in law
yeah,
enforcement.
20 we round up here.
Right.
You know,
A month. We're talking 30 days.
In law enforcement, you count nights and weekends and all that
Right,
stuff. How long
right,
you
right.
been on? I've been on 28 years.
Oh yeah, you always round up.
Yeah.
Once you hit that like 6 month mark of the year, it's the next year
Yeah.
already.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
You got to count academy time.
of
and,
course, academy time.
like you said, gopher time. So it's I wasn't even getting paid or you.
So you became a law enforcement officer, and then tell us a little bit about your career, because I know it's extensive.
Yeah, so I started off at what's now known as the Midwest District, but back then it was called Doral District. It was before the city of Doral Incorporated,
Yeah.
right? And so back then there was nothing west. It was pretty dry back there. But I did that for a year, and then I went to the Housing and Urban Development Unit. So that was under a bureau called Police Operations Bureau, and if you ever heard of HUD, right? So we had, basically what we did was that was my introduction to community policing, and it was as proactive or as community oriented as we wanted to make it. Okay. We basically had an apartment was our mini station, and we had one in Annie Coleman Apartments, and we had one in Larchmont, and then down south we had one in Naranja and Perrine. And so, but I worked the north end, so I was basically in Northside in the projects for over a year.
All right.
Yeah.
And then you took the sergeant exam, or
No, then I went to the SRT school,
Oh.
and I was in SRT for 5 years.
So SRT, Special Response Team, is SWAT
Right.
for people that are listening, because we have a lot of law enforcement centric type listeners, people that are aspiring officers right now. If you're on midnight shifts, what's up? What's going on? Stay safe. But we have a lot of people that when we say acronyms, sometimes they might not know.
Of course.
But everyone knows SWAT. But SRT is essentially SWAT, Special Response Team. It's just the name SRT.
Exact same thing, exactly. So, but back then I was still living at home. I was a young kid, 23, 24 years old. Went through the SWAT school. They didn't want to initially let me in because I was so young.
Yeah.
But during the interviews, the guy says to me, "Well, what are your strengths and weaknesses?" And I said, "Well, as a strength, I'm young. I can be molded to anything. I haven't built any bad habits." And he says, "What are your weaknesses?" And I said, "Interviewing."
Yeah.
And they all kind of just giggled, and
Yeah.
the lieutenant let me into school, and I did. And but the deal was, we'll let you into school because you're so young, but if we do bring you in, you're going to be the last one on the list to be brought in. And I thought that was fair because when you train for SWAT school, I'm sure if you don't go to the school that you're training for, don't wait for the next one because life gets in the way and it'll just never happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Between injuries and eating and
Yes.
the whole thing. So I was lucky, and I finally made it to the SWAT school, or I'm sorry, to our SWAT team. And back then, it was the only full-time SWAT team, or one of maybe 6 in the country that were actually full-time.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why some people are like, why are they don't let you on? I don't want to be on SWAT. I'm 23. I can be on SWAT. It's a high liability, high risk unit that you're put in situations that given the lack of experience can be under question for somebody that is over a commander over that unit. Like, hey, why is this guy who has no experience going into houses and everything? He needs to get a little. That's RID. I don't know if RID had a minimum amount of years. They wanted a certain amount of tenure, but I know in one of our high speed units, it was like, hey, right now we're looking for guys that are a little bit over 5 years experience.
Of course.
We kind of want that in this unit because it's such a high risk unit. Right. So I don't know, just a little explanation as to why, because we have listeners that might be questioning.
Yeah, so generally you have to make really, really fast split-second decisions during rapidly evolving events, right? And so that's anywhere in police work. So obviously you got to have a certain level of maturity, but in a SWAT team, it's multiplied, right? And so you want to have people that can maintain. I say this all the time. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I say all the time, what jiu-jitsu gives you is composure. Yeah. And so if I could train a cop, other than forget about fighting, forget about shooting, forget about anything else. If I can grab any skill or any characteristic and open it like a jar and put it in a cop's head and close it, it would be composure, right? And so generally composure comes with experience, and that's why they don't want you to be a rookie cop. But funny that I learned really early on, even in the academy, I learned that I was at a disadvantage because of age, and I'll tell you why. I was the youngest kid in the academy. I was 20 years old when I got hired. And so in the academy, there were some senior guys. Some of them were corrections officers. And one of them tells me one day, what makes you think at 20 years old, what makes you think you can go into a grown man's house on a domestic call and tell a 45-year-old man, to be quiet, or how to run his life and how to speak to his wife when you're 20 years old, you have no life experience.
Yeah.
And obviously between us, that became a joke, and I'm, going back and forth. But in my mind, I went home that day thinking, man, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of do every once in a while, like a self-inventory of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I did that, and I said, all right, I gotta be a lot less confident or outwardly, right?
Yeah.
I got to be a lot more humble and actually, treat people like what they are.
Yeah.
I'm a kid living at home. What experience do I know?
Absolutely.
Do I have, right?
Yeah.
And so that stayed with me forever. But I do think that composure is really important. I just feel that because of that conversation with that guy in the academy, it humbled me and made me more of an adult early on.
That's really true, especially because I've been in and also been around students in the academy, and you might get the older guy in there, and they crank the older guy, hey grandpa, abuelo, or whatever, and then you tell the younger guys, I'm like, hey, this guy has life experience, and he's gonna be he on scene dealing with a domestic and something he might have already gone through that. You just got out of college, man. Pump your brakes, get some of that humble sauce like you did, So
well, let's not forget, I was in the academy. I was 20 years old. I did hit him back.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that I stayed thinking about it. But I ended up telling me, well, then you're at 35 years old, or whatever age we was. You're at 35 and I'm 20, and we're in the same spot. We're in the same spot. So who's doing better in life? I was a young, stupid kid. But it did stay with me. And I think it kind of helped mold me for the rest of my career.
That's good. I had a kid that was public customer service, and they were like, because I asked everybody, hey, what do you do? What did you do? What did you do? You go around the room and you I was a dispatcher. Well, I was a public. You laughing at him? You know what we are? We're customer service, baby. We're customer service to the public. We go out there and yes, sir, how can I help you? Yes, ma'am, how can I help you? What do you need? We're there to provide that service for them. He's going to be well off when it comes to that. He's going to be a leg up in the game when he gets out there, because he already knows how to deal with people, because nowadays everyone's texting on their phone. Right. They don't know how to speak like this.
I can tell you and I hate to give you a story, but I'm going to tell you a story.
Give us stories.
How immature I was, and I didn't know, and especially when you're going through FTO, and you guys have been through that, so you know what it's like. So the FTO program is, when you go out, you first get to the road, and they put you with an officer to train you, right? Yeah. But then the problem is they give you one FTO for midnights, one FTO for afternoons, and one FTO for days, and you have to kind of adjust to their style.
Yeah.
The good thing is you're looking at different styles.
Yes.
The bad thing is when you get to the next guy, you're bringing habits from the first guy that you don't know if they're going to resonate with this guy. So you really don't know how to act.
Yeah.
So we had a call of a female who had broken up with her girlfriend and tried to commit suicide, and she slashed her wrist and stuff like that. And I'm a rookie. I go out there, and I don't know what to do. We're talking, and there's this girl probably in the worst moment of her life, and she's sitting there on the porch. She's got blood on her arms. She's, we gave her a bandage, so she's holding it there. And my FTO looks at me and says, all right, let's go. We got a Baker actor. Get her.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do, but I did what they teach us in the academy,
yeah.
Which is be assertive. And, I didn't know how to handle it. I'm a dumb, stupid kid. And I cross my arms and I say, ma'am, stand up. You're coming with me. I didn't know how to do that.
RoboCop.
Like RoboCop.
Yeah,
and I felt this small later, because what ends up happening is she just started crying even more intense. She put her head down and started crying. She's still kneeling there. Sitting in the staircase. And my FTO looked at me like I'm dumb, and sat next to her, and he put his arm around her, and he says, whatever her name was, I don't remember at the time, but let's say Ashley. And he says, Ashley, look, we have to take you because of this and this, and you've displayed a behavior that worries me, and all this kind of stuff. And she said, okay. And I felt like an ant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's when I said, I got to learn how to talk to people. And I didn't know I didn't know back then.
Yeah.
But, those are the things that kind of shape you, right?
Of course. And little things like that, exactly what you said. It shapes you. And then if you're able to have that wherewithal and understand, man, I messed up that situation, I can do better. So being able to look and critique yourself is a big thing in growing, not only in law enforcement, but in life as well. You got to understand, how did I mess up? How can I do better? And that's good that you did that at that early
Right.
stage
Right.
in your career, which kept moving. Now you did what you said, you did SWAT school or SRT school. Sorry, I don't
Yeah.
I don't want no problems.
It's all the same.
I don't want no problems.
Yeah.
Quick little story. I did a video when I first started. Somebody had asked a question, said, "Hey, is this you guys on Netflix?" Miami SRT was featured on the Netflix series called Miami SWAT. Remember that?
Right.
Were you on that show?
No.
No. Okay. So they asked a question. Is that your department? I said, no, that's not our. That's Miami-Dade Police Department's thing. If it was our department, it'd be a lot better. That's what I said.
Right.
So it was just a crank,
Of
you
course.
know. Oh man, I got wind. You know, SWAT guys are coming up to me talking. Hey, these guys at Miami-Dade, they don't like what you said about them. And I was like, man, I was just joking with them. What's
Because you
going on?
said it like in the social media comments. Or
No,
something?
I said that on video. It's still out. And if you go to my channel now, you'll see me. I address it. I said, that's not us. If it was us, it'd be a lot better. Next
Right.
question. Yeah.
Oh.
So the SWAT guys didn't like me too much over
Yeah.
there.
But you know, and back then, sorry, when I was there, it was a little more competitive between Miami-Dade and the city.
Yeah.
Like they didn't really interact a lot. And there was a lot of, it was just competitive, friendly competition that wasn't always as friendly.
Yeah.
But then they started working together. Right now, there's an excellent relationship between them, which is good because I think the whole South Florida SWAT community now gets along. They train together, they work together.
Yeah.
But before it wasn't like that. So I can see how that happened.
that's the biggest thing with everybody is it just, hey, it just happened to be a decision I made when I was 20. I
Right.
got hired by these guys. You got hired by those guys. We're trying to do the same thing.
Right.
It's not, we're not signed like a baseball team where you've got to have a.
I think it's sibling. It's like a sibling competition.
I agree.
More like together we'll throw blows at each other, but if somebody comes from the outside, we'll take care of each other. You understand? Like there's understanding.
Right.
When it becomes bigger than us, then it's like, oh no, we're same team. And then when no one's looking, it's like.
Right.
But anyways, hopefully it continues. If you become sheriff, or when you become sheriff, it continues. So let's move on. So we go SWAT school. You get out, and at what point do you get promoted? Because I know you went through the ranks, and then you can take us up to when you left.
Right.
What rank did you leave at?
When I left SWAT or when I left the department?
Department in general.
Okay, so I'll just give you a quick rundown.
Yeah.
I left SWAT. I had taken the sergeant's test. I knew that I was going to get promoted.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get off the pager because I knew that I was going to probably go to midnight shift. I'm a firm believer in that when you get promoted, you should go back to the road. I don't care if you're a detective somewhere, if you're in SWAT, you need to go back to the road and learn what uniformed cops do.
Yeah.
Right. And so I went to the training bureau. I was at the time I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, which is still kind of new in the jiu-jitsu world. And I was a defensive tactics guy and firearms instructor and all of that from SRT. So I wanted to get off the pager for 6 months before I ended up at midnights. So I did that. And then I got promoted. And when I got promoted initially, I went to the Kendall district. Did that for about a year, more or less, maybe a little shorter than a year. And then I went to the narcotics bureau and I went to TNT, Technical Narcotics Bureau. And I became the training guy, the training sergeant for TNT.
So those are the guys, plain clothes. They're jumping out of, like rental cars, undercover vehicles, stuff like that.
Right.
Bad boys stuff.
Yeah, all tacked out. Yeah.
Yeah, we have
Mike Lowry.
So they're actually not plain clothes. There are plain clothes guys that are what we call the eyeballs.
Okay.
And that's I was the sergeant of that squad.
They're not in jeans?
No.
They're
That was RID originally. So what happens is so let me go back. Before TNT became full time, they used to use crime suppression team people from all over the department, bring them all together, and they used to work. And it was funny. TNT almost stood for Tuesdays and Thursdays because that was when, and the bad guys knew it.
Yeah. So did they wear jeans and backwards hats and beards?
They did back then.
Okay, so then that's what I thought.
They did back then.
Yeah.
And then when TNT became full time, then we ended up having a uniform. But the only guys that weren't in uniform were the eyeball guys, because those are the guys that literally are in a tree or wearing a ghillie suit. A lot of them are it's really creative how they get to. One guy was so close to the drug dealer as he was watching that the drug dealer decided to, this is a true story, went to take a bathroom break and urinated on him in a fence line. And that's how close he was, and had to sit there and let it all happen.
Yeah.
Right. It's the mission.
Yep.
I'm for the mission.
Yeah. Just
Exactly.
seal up.
He is.
tight.
He was committed.
Yeah.
But then, so I left TNT and got brought back to the training bureau, because by that time they started the TASER program, and it was then that I started to act as the subject matter expert for use of force for Dade County.
Okay, so you were the subject matter.
Yeah,
expert.
I did that all the way to captain, right? And so for a long and still kind of still doing it today even, but that teaches you to grow up really, really quickly because you're a sergeant. So generally in departments like the size of Miami-Dade, a sergeant is not going to write policy. He may write policy for an SOP, like a local SOP for a squad.
Standard
maybe.
operating procedure.
Yeah, sorry. Standard
no.
up. You know, and so in other words,
rule,
little
regulation,
rules, small little rules
Yeah.
that affect his squad.
Guidelines.
Right.
Yeah.
But he won't write departmental policy that's going to affect globally the entire department.
Yeah.
And especially in the most litigious area of law enforcement, which is use of force.
Yes.
And the reason why it makes you grow up quickly is because not only are you developing the curriculum, you're making the policy, and then you got to defend that policy whenever there's something questionable. So if you have a high-profile incident that makes the news, I would be the one writing a professional opinion either to the county attorney's office, to the Internal Affairs Bureau. I had a relationship with our directors that if I wanted to hear their opinion on use of force, I gave it to them. Meaning they would come up and say, "What do you think about this?" You know, that kind of thing. And so it teaches you to grow up really, really quickly, because you're going to be taking the depositions on actions an officer took that you told them they can take.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
And so I did that. I did that for over 18 years. Yeah.
You're protected right there. You don't become liable if you use they get sued civilly, or the city gets.
I mean, you can be that's a vicarious liability, right? So you can be, but you know, we have the PBA, we have the collective bargaining unit and the PBA who would defend us if we're representing the department, as long as it's not a criminal act.
So we have some scenarios later on that I want to get into that have some of that. We could touch some of that, and it's good that you're here and that you have those credentials. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Awesome.
So before we take a quick break, I don't want to gloss over it. We can continue to talk about the career, because I think it's important.
It is.
It's important because if you're running for sheriff, we got to know, hey, who's this guy that's going to be the sheriff over our public safety, which includes fire, right?
Actually, it won't.
It won't include fire. Not this one.
No.
But Broward does.
Broward does.
Broward has all three, but we won't have fire.
Oh, okay. I was going to say. You're gonna have to
It's
learn.
not to say that it can't change, but as of right now, no, we won't.
Okay. I was gonna say, you have to learn how to get in those recliners and take long breaks and naps and stuff.
Wear the
Shout out
shiny
to all my
hat.
firemen. Yeah. We had a fireman on. It was funny. We'll bring him back
ago.
on. But anyways, so I think it's important to know the credentials. Like, hey, who's this guy? Because you know, any Joe Schmo can come on and say that they know what they're gonna do, but to be able to have, okay, so what have you done that you know you're gonna do?
Yeah, no, it's really important, especially for a position like that, because it shows. I mean, whoever gets elected needs to be versatile.
Yep.
Right. They have to have experience in a lot of different fields, and I'm not talking about just tactics. I'm not talking about in training, but even in like proactive enforcement and boots on the ground stuff.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we know that the troops want to know that you've been there and done that.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the people that I've always said, I'll never ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do. And that I haven't done it 100 times already. And I think that means a lot.
Yes, absolutely. So now, with that being said, so you went to Midnights as a sergeant, and then you got called back to training. So can you continue on?
Yeah. So then I did that for 5 years in training. I got promoted out of there and became a lieutenant. I initially started at the Port of Miami. Then there was an issue in RID where the assistant director called me. So one of the things I'm real proud of is I've only interviewed for one assignment in the department and then a promotion. So an assignment is one thing and then a promotion is another.
Yeah.
I've only interviewed for one assignment. So as you know, in the police department, as you grow, whatever specialized unit you want to go to, you have to interview for, and you go through a panel and do the whole thing and get selected. I was lucky enough to where I was told to go wherever they told me to go, which to me, I like to think that it has to do with the fact that they saw value in me.
Of course.
And so when there was a troubled area or whatever, I didn't interview. They said, we need you here.
That's good.
And so they needed me at the moment. The assistant director, our former director, Loftus, James Loftus, wanted me in the robbery intervention detail. And so I went there. I established a lot of training protocols. There were some questionable incidents that occurred, or perceived to be questionable.
Yeah.
And so they brought me in, and I started a training regimen with them. And like I said, I was there for 5 years. It's very difficult to find a lieutenant to want to be there for 1 year,
Yeah.
let alone be the commander for 5.
Yes.
And when I say commander, I was one of the commanders. There were 2, the day shift lieutenant and myself. And so then I left out of there, and I got brought back to the training bureau. And then I oversaw all training, right? Anything that had to do, as a lieutenant, I oversaw anything that had to do with high liability and use of force.
Okay.
So anything from, tactics to firearms to defensive tactics to tasers to batons, anything that had to do with any application of force. So I oversaw that entire area. And there we developed a really, I'll say, challenging training tempo. Because we started what we called our first of its kind. So what happens is every year the state requires you to qualify, right, and show proficiency every 2 years. What we do is we find it easier. We already have the curriculum. Let's have them shoot at the target, and they show proficiency and everything else. To me, I feel that's kind of like saying, all right, congratulations. You came over here and showed proficiency in the firearm at the most minimum level. Congratulations. You're just trained enough to be able to carry a gun legally. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we said, no, it's not training. It's not really training. It's a showing of proficiency. 2 different things.
Check in a box.
Exactly. And so I said, no, we need to do something a little more training oriented. And so we started what was lovingly called by the guys fight camp. And it was pretty much according to the Simunition guys, one of the most aggressive programs in the country where we did this. It was 8 hours of nothing but force-on-force decision-making, training. And so we did that. Shortly after that, I get promoted and I become a captain. I became the captain for the Northside District. Then I went over from Northside District, I went back to training. They brought me back. I was there for on or about 3 years and then left that and went to Kendall District and then became the captain of the Warrants Bureau.
So do you see that, like, in training, there's a guy, right? And this is just talking in general because people might be like, why are you going back to training? Man, if there's a resource and you're developing this resource over the years and bring him back. If he gets promoted, that's good for him. He's progressing in his career.
Right.
But why not have that resource back over as long as you're in good standings and there's nothing happening, why not continue to bring back that person to training? And I think it just shows your credentials again. Like, I'm sure did you go have all kinds of qualifications in order to be there, in order to teach this stuff? Right?
Yeah, a lot of experience, but I was I'm a sub-gun instructor. I'm a taser training advisory board member with, taser. So I'm higher than what's called a senior master instructor. I got all the firearm certifications, all the defensive tactics certifications, all the SWAT related, hostage rescue, everything else. So, there's a lot of value in bringing back somebody that knows what they're doing. Yeah. But I also wanted to be on the road because I do consider myself a street cop. But the way I looked at it is, at one time, J.D. Patterson, who's the former director, now I think he's the chief of public safety. One day there was some issues in SWAT and he asked, or in SRT, and he asked me if I wanted to go back, and I told him, well, I'll do whatever you want because I don't ask for favors. You put me where you want. I said, but in SRT as a lieutenant, I can affect 34 people, but over here I'm affecting 3,200 people.
Yeah.
And then he said, okay, good answer. Who else do you think should go there?
Let's get, how large is the agency?
3,200, but I don't think they're staffed right now. That changes monthly. I don't think they're staffed. It
fluctuates.
I think they're about 200 people short.
Including civilians?
No, civilians, I think we're in the 5,000 range.
That's what I was going to say. So it's going to be, it's a position that's over a lot of employees.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll take a quick break.
Because we'll come back and we'll wrap up.
Perfect.
We'll finish out the career, and then we're going to get into some scenarios. Going to get the hot seat.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Going to get the hot seat. And we'll be right back.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun, and I hope what I said resonated with you. If you want to support and help out the campaign, the website is www.marioforsheriff.com. It's Mario for Sheriff on Instagram, and it's also Mario for Sheriff on Facebook. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are you a police officer? Do you work at a police department that is hiring? Well, guess what? This is the opportunity in a lifetime for you. You could be featured on a Donut Shop podcast commercial break, letting us know that your department is hiring. So if you're interested in recruiting on the podcast for free, go to www.donutshoppodcast.com, go to the Contact Us portion of the website, and then you can submit your info there. Remember, it's for free. Let's get back to the show. And we're back. How'd you like that commercial, sir?
That was impressive.
He's good. He's good. So here we go. We're moving through your career, and we're about to get to the end of your career. Is there anything that stands out that maybe you want to touch on? That you're like, hey, there was this incident or something that happened with me, and it kind of changed the course of my career, or there's some motivation that happened that I was like, I really want to become and move to the ranks or something, and I'll give you an opportunity to touch on that. But take us through now. We're captain. Now you're captain, and you're over at the. Did you say North Side or was it?
So yeah, I went to. I started in Northside.
Yeah.
Then I went to the training bureau.
Yeah.
Continued on. Now I oversaw all departmental training.
Yeah.
Everything, both high liability and not.
Wow.
And then after that, I went to Kendall, and then I went to the Warrants Bureau, where I oversaw the Warrants Bureau.
So you've been all over. So you understand inside out that department pretty much.
Nobody can lie to me in that department.
Yeah. Have you ever did a stint in IA?
I didn't.
Oh, he did. Okay.
I didn't, but I did work with
All right,
them.
He's good.
Yeah. No, I did work with IA a lot because remember, as you know, use of force cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ones that were complaints and went to internal affairs. So I had a lot to do with a lot of those cases, but I didn't work directly with.
So yeah, I mean,
within the
you're
unit.
pretty much part of the research team for cases where
Right.
like you said,
Yeah, so on a lot of these cases, if they go to internal affairs, what ends up happening is the case then gets, they give it back to the director. The director gives it to a disposition panel, which is, chiefs and majors. And then they write their findings, right? And then a lot of times I would write what's called if another major called me and said, wait, they're doing this. I need you as an expert to tell me what your view is. I'd have to sometimes disagree or agree with what the chiefs found. So that's what you call a non-concurrence memo. And I would write, I don't concur because of this and this and this. Right. And
so maybe some people are like, this guy.
Right.
Mr. Know-It-All over here.
There were times.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those things where you have to, the cards fall where they may.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you can't, as an expert, you cannot lose credibility. So even if you want to help the guy, you can't. Because when that case comes up later, you've already lost your credibility before. You see what I mean?
Real quick, is it true that the more you move up in rank, the more you know?
Yeah, I'm going to take a fifth on that one.
Plead the fifth.
Okay, I just don't know. I don't know. It could be that.
Yeah, I can tell you that I feel that there's a lot of people that move up quickly. Mm-hmm. If you look at my career and you look at the timelines, I've always been really proud at the fact that I was well rooted in every rank.
Okay.
I never skipped a rank.
Yeah.
I was never in a rank less than a year or two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a long-time sergeant. I was a long-time captain. I was a long-time lieutenant.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the reason why I say is because you were writing. Would you say called it concurrence letters? Is that-
mostly professional opinions.
Okay, so and at times you have people that are reviewing stuff that might not, that this is not their forte, and it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. But it's good that you have somebody there who's an expert in that.
Right, and it's necessary. Like for example, I can talk to you about a body cam footage video where the chief wrote, well, if you slow the video down and they freeze a frame, the officer should have seen that there was a mark. And I'm like,
I can
hold
do
on.
that.
Because the
Yeah,
officer's Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell.
Right. And so, and when I spoke to them and I spoke to the policy writers specific to body-worn cameras, I told them, look, there needs to be something that says that not everything that the camera captures could the officer see. And he says, no, it already says that. And he reads it to me and he says, look, it says here that not everything that the officer sees does the camera see. And I said, no, but you got to put the opposite.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the reason why you have to is because a lot of these new cameras, right, especially the Axon cameras, the most high speed, the best quality, I mean, they are the best ones out there. Well, they have image optimization features.
Yeah.
Because they're not designed they're designed to show evidence. and capture evidence. They're not designed to prove that the officer saw it or not. Because remember, you look at the body-worn camera, you can be looking this way, and the camera's facing this way. So, and not only that, the human eye at night is not going to be able to capture everything the camera captures. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so if you don't have people that are willing to say that and kind of remind people that, no, I see what you're saying, but it doesn't fit reality, right? We got to be able to do that.
There's an interesting video that it showcases that, and it's and I'm sure you've seen it. It's the gorilla one. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. Like we watch. Are they they're bouncing a ball or something? You want to explain that video?
Yeah. So and there were two versions of it.
Yeah.
For those who saw the first one,
Yeah.
and then they think they capture it. So basically, what it is if I remember correctly, it's a basketball.
Yeah.
And what it is they're saying, how many times does the basketball get passed around?
We're going to
so
play the video as you're doing this,
Yeah.
by the way. Go
And so what ends up happening is you'll see the people throwing the basketball, and then the video ends, and then it says, did you see the guy dressed like a gorilla walk across the screen? And by far and large, most people are like, never saw it. You rewind it, and now you look at it because your eye and your brain can only capture so much stimulus.
Yeah.
Right? And
Especially if you're focusing, because
you're trying to count.
The task is the basketball
Right.
passing from hand to hand.
Exactly. And our human brain, it's not AI. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can only focus on a certain number of things at a certain time.
Well, and that's how so much magic works.
So mind you,
illusions and stuff. They're talking, and then what they do with their hands.
Yeah.
And you're listening
Sleight
to
of
what
hand.
they're saying,
Yeah.
or so they realize what you can't focus on,
Right.
and that's how they pass the card or flip the card. Or
If you watch, I believe it's like a PE setting, right? So
Yeah,
it doesn't look like. There's no reason why there should be a guy in a gorilla costume. It's not like Halloween or
exactly.
something, and they're just passing a ball back and forth. And sure as shit, the guy comes walking through the back in a gorilla costume, and when you see it, you're like, oh my god! And it's right there.
Yeah.
It is right there.
There's
It's
a
so
few
obvious.
versions of
Yeah.
it. There's a few versions
Yeah.
of it. But then what's funny is some people will then show you that one, and then they'll go, try it again. And now it's not a gorilla, it's something else like a chicken, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what you don't realize is now they say, but how many times did the background screen, the curtain in the back, how many times did that change color?
Yeah.
Well, you missed that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that reinforces what you were saying about the body camera stuff. Is like, it's not everything the officer sees, because in real life the officers focus on whatever he's focused or she's focused on. They're focused on that, and their brain is keyed in on that. So they might catch your hands doing that or something. So that's a perfect video to show the example of what you're talking about.
Right.
But anyways, moving forward. So now you're the expert there to take us towards. Is there anything else between that captain?
Yeah. So then after the Warrants Bureau, I got asked to act as the chief of Public Information and Education Bureau, which is basically media relations. And I did that for a while. That came after a tweet. So during the BLM issues that we're having, I was the commander of the Warrants Bureau at the time. And so the Warrants Bureau also houses the headquarters security unit. There were a lot of rumors at the time that some groups were going to come and basically destroy the headquarters building, because it was happening all over the country.
Was it 2020-ish or 2016-ish?
About 2020-ish.
Okay, so 2020-ish.
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, the 2016 was a different era. I remember that
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
And I have questions about all that
Right,
stuff, so
right.
we're gonna talk about that another way.
So, but the 2021, I was sitting up there, and the crowds are moving, and they're moving through Bayfront Park and or Bayside. And I had a conversation with the director, and as a result of the conversation and a tweet that was put out, he asked me to be the chief of public of PIO, right? And so I did that for a little bit, and then I became the major of Special Patrol Bureau.
Okay.
So under Special Patrol, I was in command of the SWAT team, the bomb squad, the aviation unit, the Marine Patrol unit, the K-9 unit, the motors unit, the divers unit, the incident management team, which is all major catastrophes, all major incidents. So I spent my last 30 days as the commander of the command post for the building collapse, the Surfside building collapse.
Oh wow.
Yeah, those were my last 30 days. I thought my last 30 days, I was going to have my feet up, crossed on the
Right.
desk,
Yeah.
reminiscing this.
Hawaiian shirt.
So did you do the drop, or did you leave?
I did the drop for 33 days. I probably have a record. Yeah.
So the drop program, it's you can essentially retire from the agency, but you're still working employed, and you're collecting your pension.
And that money's going into a separate account.
Exactly. But so now you retire, right? Was there a reason why you only did 33 days?
So there was. I got an offer in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of irresponsible for me not to take at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a technology that was being looked at. They recognized my experience in use of force and in law enforcement in general, and they offered me a position, and I tried to say no, but it just made sense at the time, and so I did, and I stepped away in pretty short notice,
Mm-hmm.
and I left. I spoke to the director, and I told him that I was leaving, and I did that for a year. But what ended up happening there was, within that capacity, I was traveling all over the world, and talking to police chiefs and talking to trainers and basically almost acting as a consultant to them on use of force related,
Cool.
Right.
things. And so it kept my finger on law enforcement.
Yeah.
And then I have, police chiefs that still call me saying, hey, we just had this incident. How do you think we should, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then I left the company. Some things changed there, and I figured, you know what, it's time for me to come back, and I wanted to come back to the department, and this, sheriff thing was happening, and I tossed it around with a few people, and I thought, you know what, yeah, I think, and I called Freddie.
Mm.
I told him, and I said, Freddie, look, I mean, I didn't tell him I'm running against you. I told him we're in this race
Freddie
together.
is the director, for those listening. It was the director of Miami-Dade Police Department at the time, which was not an elected position.
It was not.
It
Right.
was not, and we're going to speak on now.
Yes.
What I want to get to right after we do this is what. But I continue.
No, so I spoke to Freddie. I called him. He's been a friend of mine for 20 years, and I called him and I said, look, this is I'm not running against you. We're in this race together.
Yeah.
Because this is no more than a very big, open and public job interview.
Yes.
And I'm going to interview. Just like if it was the private sector, you have 4 VPs that want to go and take the CEO position.
Yeah.
You're all friends, but you're going to interview for the job.
Absolutely.
And so I decided I was going to do that, and I did. And so here we are.
How's that been going?
It's been going good.
How many months now?
I've now been in the race for exactly 2 months.
2 months. Okay. So hey, you're here, right?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it's a different. Look, I don't think that the position is a political position.
Yeah.
Although you have to go through the political process and run a campaign to get elected. So, but I think there's a political aspect to it that I'm not 100% in agreement with. But at the end of the day, if we care about what's going to happen in this, in this county, and you still feel that you can make a difference, and you have the tools to improve it, then you got to go through what you got to go through to get the job.
Absolutely. So now moving forward, there's going to be a new sheriff in town, as we like to say. I don't know who's we, but so can you tell us, man? 60 years we have not had a sheriff in Miami-Dade County.
Right.
All right, and with that, I just want to put some stuff out there. If you look at Miami-Dade County's police's badge, they go as a police department first. You want to explain that?
Yeah. So there's 67 counties in the state of Florida.
Okay.
Historically, all 67 have a duly elected sheriff, which means that the people elect their head of agency, right? And the difference between that and a police department is that a police department reports to city or county government, right? So either a city manager or a mayor elects the police chief, and generally, that's the way it runs. What ended up happening here is in the 1960s, there was some grand jury indictments, and the sheriff of Miami-Dade was found to be corrupt. I mean, and we're talking about systemic corruption. We're going to use the word systemic.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Okay.
Right? It was all over the ranks. And so at the time, he obviously went to jail. They couldn't risk having an undetected corrupt officer run for office and potentially win and continue this cycle. So what they ended up doing was they said, no, we got to bring somebody from the outside, somebody who's got no ties to Miami, knows nobody here, and is going to come over here and clean up the department.
Yeah.
And they did. And they brought in a guy who did that, and that structure remained intact through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s, which is when I became a cop, then through the 2000s. And then in, I think it was 2018, it was put on a ballot. And the question was, should we go back to a duly elected sheriff structure? And the reason why, I mean, I remember the talks back then, we were a little concerned because we're like, anybody can run for this. Like, you don't have to have a,
Right.
what if just, I don't know, an example. somebody with a big Instagram following, just for the sake of it, because he fought yesterday. If Jake Paul,
Oh, okay.
right?
Oh, yeah.
The social
I
media.
thought you were going to say
sensation.
me.
No, it could be you. It could be you. But see, you have law enforcement experience.
Yeah.
Right. And
You'd be better qualified than Jake Paul.
For sure.
Congratulations.
I'm not putting my name in the hat.
but what I mean by that is anybody with a strong social media following could
Yes.
potentially get elected, and what happens?
Yeah.
Right. And so, so they decided that we need to go back to an elected sheriff so that there's no political influence, because the system lends itself to the idea that, the mayor can control what happens in the department.
That was going to be one of my questions, but you can continue.
Right. And so that's what the electorate voted on. It went, I think it was 56 or 58% here in Dade County, but I want to say it was 64% throughout the state.
Okay.
Right. And so here we are. The election is official, and here we are in the middle of the campaign.
So, and you kind of touched on it, but to narrow it down, what do you think is a more political position? Is a sheriff or a chief? Meaning that they're a manager is essentially their boss. A city manager is their boss.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I don't think there's any scientific way to answer it, and here's why. Because there's politics in every company, private, public sector, nonprofits. There's politics everywhere, right? I think the issue with this office is that now we're not accustomed to having an elected sheriff that has to run a political campaign.
Right.
So from that perspective, it becomes political, right? But I think it's better answered by saying, I think it depends on who gets elected.
Yeah.
Right. Because for example, I'm not a politician. I'm not in this trying to gain power. I'm trying to assume responsibility, which are two different things. And I think all I'm concerned about is the crime rate and the safety of Miami-Dade County citizens. And so I'm looking at this as, forget about the fact that I'm elected. I have to go through the process to get elected. But all I'm really focused on is how are we going to keep this safe, right? How are we going to make it safe? How are we going to support the officers? How are we going to balance, community engagement, community involvement, community affairs with a police department that's out there trying to protect the community, right? And that's all I'm really concerned about. So I'm not trying to gain power. That kind of thing.
And I think with that said, knowing both sides, I see people might not understand. Like the chief of police still has to answer to somebody, whereas the sheriff answers to the constituents, the people that voted him or her into that position. So it's a little bit different where people might say, oh, the sheriff that's a more political position. Not after you get elected, because after you get elected, your responsibility is to uphold what you promised to the community as you were running. Like, this is what I'm going to stand for. This is what I'm going to do. And they voted you in. You said you're going to do that, so you're going to do that. And you don't really have to answer to nobody but that. And it shows, if you look, there's a very big difference if you start keying in on this, when you see news across the nation, you see news, and then you have a chief speak on something, then you have a sheriff speak. And just one of the great sheriffs up in Central Florida, Grady Judd, when he's like, well, why did you shoot him 49 times? It's like, well, because we ran out of bullets,
Yeah.
And no, that's what the constituents want up there. That's what they elected him, because they want a no nonsense. We don't tolerate crime. If there's somebody shooting at you, then handle your business, and we're okay with you handling your business, according to policy or whatever. So that's what they want, and that's why he's able to speak like that. Now, if you see a chief that is elected, they're not appointed, not elected, appointed. They might be a little more restricted and calculated on what they're saying, because they have to make sure that they're not going to piss somebody off.
Exactly.
So that's why I asked that question. And you being now in the position of running for sheriff, and you're starting out, you can maybe tell that story a little bit better than me, just looking from the outside and say, well, it's probably this and probably that.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I say that the way I look at it is, it's not about power, it's about responsibility. And what I mean by that is directly what you said. I plan to be held responsible for decisions that I make or decisions that I don't make.
Yeah.
Where under the current structure, you can have a lot of levels. Like if the police department does something, you got to remember right now, according to the charter, the mayor, the sitting mayor right now, is the de facto sheriff.
Okay.
She is the sheriff.
Yeah.
And she can run the department and however she wants because she is the sheriff. It's up to her responsibility. So now what happens
With zero law enforcement. I don't know her background, but I would
well, yeah,
assume
that's the
zero
way
law enforcement.
the Constitution was written or the charter was written.
Yeah.
That by default she is the sheriff or the sitting mayor. Forget about her for a second. The sitting mayor is the sheriff. So
Yeah.
that's why they get to make decisions in the department. Now, the reason why that becomes significant is because if something goes wrong in a police department, the mayor can say, "Oh no, that was the police."
Yeah.
Because other mayors have been historically a little bit less involved in the department. She's actually pretty involved, and that's her style, right?
Yeah.
So, but you can go back and forth, and the blame game can
Yeah.
occur. The way I look at it is, if I'm going to be the sheriff, hold me accountable for what it is, and
Yeah.
I'm going to take full responsibility for what I did or for what I didn't do, right? And I think it's important, especially right now, because if you look around the country, look at all these cities and how they're becoming more lawless as we go. Weak policies and this anti-police sentiment just doesn't work. And I've said it before. It's not working in any of the other cities. It's not working in San Francisco. It's not working in Atlanta. It's not working in Chicago. And we got to protect Miami-Dade because we got to make sure that we don't let it get to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's why you're here, because we want to make sure you're not going to New York or Florida or
No. No,
California
no.
or
good sign.
LA or
Yeah,
Florida.
it's an important time for that because we're kind of at a crossroads on which way we're going to go, and this election is going to be really pivotal on that.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, but so if you don't know listening, you don't run. You're just not running for sheriff as a person. You have to affiliate with Republican, Democrat, or independent. Is there independent seats as well?
Yeah, you can run as an
Yeah. So I mean, so did you mention what you're running?
Yeah, so it's a partisan race, which means that that you have to pick a side, whether you're Republican, non-party affiliation, or Democrat. I'm a Republican, and I'm running as a Republican because my values have always fallen on the Republican side. So I say all the time that if this were the middle, this were the right, and this were the left, I'm not all the way right.
Yeah.
My roots just happen to be on the right side. But if it were a tree, there's still fruit falling on the left side, right?
Yeah.
There are some. I'm an independent thinker.
I think that's what you need to be. It's
Yeah,
like,
I'm an independent thinker, but most of my values fall on the Republican side, and I'm not willing to change who I am, right? And that's what I think. But I don't necessarily agree that this office should be partisan because I have never in my life, and I don't know of anybody. You guys tell me if you've seen anybody who's ever walked into a domestic and said, "What's your name, date of birth, and political affiliation?"
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because if any cop did, he should be in jail.
correct.
For doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense to you.
So I don't think it makes sense to make it partisan. But look, independent of political party, here's what I do see. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, whether you're white, blue, green, whether you're gay, straight, it doesn't matter who you are. I think everybody in the county and everybody in the nation deserves to feel safe.
Yep.
Right. So base your opinion on who you're going to vote for on who you think is going to keep you safer, because I don't write policies. You know what I mean? It's just very quick and easy.
Yeah.
Is it illegal or is it not illegal? Does it affect public safety? And then that's when we're going to act. And that's the concept. Right.
I think it's fair enough.
Right.
And having politics in law enforcement, it
clouds the water.
Exactly. I was going to say blur, but clouds the water sounds good.
Right.
And it makes it, like you said, it messes things up.
Right.
Because I'm not going to speak anymore because you said exactly what I was going to say. It's like, you don't come in and say, "Hey, who'd you vote for? Are you Republican, Democrat?" It's like, no, what am I here for? How can I help you? But that was.
Yeah, if you handle a case or a call differently just because of a flag that might have been flying outside of a house, then you're not doing your job right.
Find me that guy.
Yeah.
Find me the cop who does that, and I'll deal with him at the. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So because you should be handling it by the book that's sitting in your car.
And you have to, because as law enforcement, our image is questioned all the time. Right? Because we got to make rapidly evolving events all the time in a split second. You know what I mean? And so our image is questioned all the time. So I cannot afford to have a cop out there that's going to do something like that and police in a partisan way, because it ruins the credibility for the other well-intentioned cops that are doing it great. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we got to make sure that we have somebody that understands that and is willing to, or not willing to compromise, the
So it just speaks to why it's a little weird that they choose to make it a partisan type race.
All right, it's 2024. You're now sheriff. Which direction are we going? What are we doing different? Where are you taking the Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Department?
Right. So I'm one of those people. I've been gone for 2 years now, right? So for me to say what's going on, although I do have a lot of information about what's going on, I like to measure twice and cut once. So to walk in the day, in the department the very first day and say I'm going to do this and this and this, no, I'm not going to do that. What I got to do is I have to go and be a almost like a factory floor manager, right? And really investigate and see, look in the bucket and see what's in it in every unit. I have a feeling, based on what I've been seeing in the last few months and years, is that we have to reprioritize the way we have the department structured. We definitely got to do that. We have to make uniform patrol. We have to fortify that. Because at the end of the day, what I got to make sure and what I want to make sure is that every every citizen in Dade County, when they call the police is going to get there, and they're going to get there in the shortest amount of time possible.
Yes.
Right? That's what we got to make sure. And so there's a lot of specialized units. There's a lot of emphasis on like right now, there's a lot of emphasis on community-oriented things, which I think are vital. I think they're important. But I also know when I was a captain in Northside, they were overstaffed to the point where there's a lot of guys sitting around doing nothing when they should be out there handling calls and delivering safety, right? So those are some of the things we need to do. And, there's a big issue, I think, nationally, in that there's an 18% increase in early retirements and resignations. And part of the reason why that happens is because officers just don't feel supported, right? And so a lot of the community may not realize, and they may say, oh, well, they have an easy job. No, it's not about that. It's about there's a direct correlation between police service and the way those officers feel in terms of support. Because I remember when I first became a cop, if there was a hot call, a shooting call, an armed robbery, a robbery in progress, or a rape or something like that, I knew I had to stop at the green light because there were 4 police cars that were running the red light to get there faster. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. We were in a hurry to get there. And with this anti-police sentiment, what it's done is it's made officers question, every decision they make. Yeah. And so it removes the initiative for officers to get there fast, because if they go there now, and I kind of have to talk about this. If you look at fighters, if you look at football players, if you look at, I don't know, let's say Conor McGregor, in my opinion, the best fighter in the...
How you like McGregor? But hold on. Can you just move the... Just turn the... it's like straighten it to your... Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
So I have to say this because it goes in line, right? When these fighters, let's say Mike Tyson, before Mike Tyson fights somebody, he watches video after video after video after video, right? The Dolphins' offensive, line, they're gonna review video on whoever they're fighting or they're playing, the Bills, right? And they're gonna look at video and video and video and kind of dissect everybody's responsibility. They have different coaches that look at different things to get them to play this game. Yet they still make mistakes. Yeah. But when they do, it doesn't cost anything. Yeah. They lost a point. They lost 3 yards. Nobody goes to jail. Yeah. Nothing happens. Cops are expected to get it right 100% of the time. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And their faculties are not the same. They're just as scared as everyone else. And, people have this image that cops are going to go out there and that they should be Superman, and they're not. And the reason why I mentioned that is so now when an officer goes there and gets to the call fast and he's trying to, deliver safety, right, and save people's lives, and he makes a decision that we'll say was probably not perfect. He could have done it better. But now we're going to crucify the guy, and now he's getting sued. He loses his job, ends up in handcuffs, ends up in jail for something that he did that was, probably like a split-second decision. We're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes, exactly.
I think
I like that.
I think it's a good one. Yeah, I think look. When cops do wrong, we're going to handle it like we've done. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We're going to correct it. We're going to bring them in. We're going to train them better. But this whole idea that they have to get it right 100% of the time. Now, obviously, if there's an injury, that's a different thing. We got to handle it. But we've done it in a way where cops don't feel supported, and therefore now that translates back to what I talked about, which is there's no incentive to get to the scene earlier. Right? So now your kids, I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. When they call the police, I don't care what you got to do. I want you there in seconds, right? And if they have to, if they're hesitant to get there, I think that's a problem, and I think it does influence the service they provide.
Yeah, I think to talk about it more is that officers are seeing other officers across the nation, and maybe not so that there's anti-police sentiment, meaning like people are like, what do we want? Pigs in a blanket. What do we want now? And that definitely plays a huge role. Also, what is the leadership that either appeases that audience and takes care or not takes care of, but maybe terminates the officer on something that is questionable or needs to be further investigated. And they're quick to pull the trigger and say, no, that guy's fired. Are you guys okay? That guy's fired. Right. So you have these younger officers that see that and are intimidated and like, man, if I go and engage this person and I have to get physical and God forbid something happens where I have to use force and maybe not deadly, but anything, and it gets captured and put in the wrong light, I'm going to lose my job. Ain't worth it.
Right.
Not worth it. I mean, that along with the anti-police sentiment, it's also leadership and them not taking that stance. And it could be, politically or maybe not or something. But that's why when a sheriff can say, you know what, I'm gonna do because I'm elected to do this. Let me look at this. And guess what? If the officer's wrong, I'm gonna handle that. The officer, he gets terminated or he gets. But I have to make sure, like you say, I have to check it, measure it twice before I cut.
Right. Yeah, and when I talk about support, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that if an officer does something wrong that he shouldn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I am saying is that too many times cops, we make decisions, commands that or chiefs make decisions that are more politically motivated than they have to do with reality. Yeah, it's not what really occurred. It's not representative of what happened. It's just that it's easier for me. Let's get this, and here goes this poor guy's career, who he didn't do anything really necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
Now, can we correct some stuff? Yeah, we will. Yeah. Right. But when you talk about the difference between a chief and a sheriff, I'm one of those people that I do feel that whether you're a chief or a sheriff, if you know your job well enough and you know what the challenges are, even if you're a chief, you should be able to stand up and say, no, this is, you got to do it for what it's right, not politically motivated. So that's why I do agree with the fact that we're going to an elected sheriff, because it gives you more latitude to do that. But I don't think that being a chief gives you the excuse to not defend your officers when they're doing it right.
Yeah. The reason why is and again, I'm not gonna say names, but there was a chief that came into town from a different area and took pride on firing officers and was like at a hair trigger, just fire, you're fired, and that's what he took pride in, to fire officers. And it was like, hey man, I don't know who you're trying to appease here, but that's not, everyone, if it meets the criteria, by all means. And again, I'm not a chief, so I don't know what they'd have to deal with. But from an officer's perspective, you're kind of looking around and looking to my left and my right. It's like, why would they want to lose their career on something that could put them in a situation where they have to use force, and now they're under scrutiny, and I can't, do this or do that. I'm just not going to do it because I don't have confidence in myself, in my abilities. 'Cause I'm maybe not trained, and I don't feel protected.
Right.
So that's where the morale, I guess, what you were trying to allude to, is the morale of officers now. It's kind of like they're a little bit like, hey, why no one likes us? I'm gonna get fired for this.
Right.
I'm not risking my ass. Yeah,
and I think that remember, there's the correlation between how officers feel and the service they deliver in terms of how fast they get there and everything else. And I think that's what's missing. At the end of the day, it's all about making it safer for the community, but giving the officers the training and the tools that they need to do it. That's what it's really about.
I love it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to put you in the hot seat. It's going to get hot in here, sir. You might want to take off your jacket, roll up them sleeves.
I might take it off right now.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back. Real quick, wanted to talk to you about Battle Warrior Coffee. I know the owners personally. They're fellow law enforcement officers. I told them that I would shout them out. I've had their coffee. It is delicious. So it's a veteran-owned, law enforcement-operated company originated out of Miami, Florida. It's started by 3 Army veterans turned police officers who say coffee got them through many difficult times through their career and still does today. Their goal is to get every warrior to overcome their personal battles one cup of coffee at a time. Visit their website at battlewarriorcoffee.com or follow them on IG at Battle Warrior Coffee. Again, at Battle Warrior Coffee. Use the code DONUT and get 15% off your first order, or you can visit them at fedsapparel.com. They're on their veteran-owned companies and Leo-owned companies. There's also a discount code there for 15% off by using Donut. Donut gets you 15% off. Just put Donut everywhere you go, and you get 50% off of this coffee. All right, let's get back to the show. So what we're looking at here, we're back, by the way. What we're looking at here is an awesome idea that you were telling me about, where you, at one point when you were, was this when you were the commander? Or
I was actually the captain of training.
Okay, and then you came up with the idea of showing your officers, because soon they'll be deputies, right?
Right.
So showing the officers, in civilian clothes, in their civilian capacity, showing what they do off duty.
Right.
And a lot of them, from that, what I saw, you want to just explain the picture for the radio?
Yeah, so basically it was not just sworn officers, but professional staff, civilian staff.
Okay.
And so the concept was, we have a lot of people within the department, sworn and not sworn, who do really, really cool stuff on the outside. So we have MMA fighters, we have boxers, we have people who are CrossFitters, like professional CrossFitters. Yeah. We have race car drivers, we have people that jump out, skydivers. Yeah. And so the concept was, let's put them all in the whatever uniform, right? Whatever attire they wear when they're off duty doing those activities, and show the public that these are humans. They're actually really cool people, and they're not the robots that we think they are, walking around with a badge and a gun. Yeah. Right. And that was the concept.
And the picture came out pretty good. So it's a pretty awesome idea, executed by a very creative person running for sheriff.
Well, that picture was just a prototype. That was a
concept.
Kind of a concept, and we never ended up doing it.
Okay.
It ended up not occurring because I left training at the time. The idea kind of wavered off.
But it was pretty. Did you put that together yourself?
Yes.
Oh, so you have a little bit of Photoshop abilities.
Yeah, I actually do. I used to be an artist.
Oh.
And I used to.
That's why you like the Bob Ross.
Yes. Yeah. I used to be an airbrush guy.
Oh.
Oh wow.
So yeah. So I used to airbrush T-shirts as a kid.
Really?
Yeah. I ran 12 airbrushes at the same time, one for every color, kind of like what you see at the youth fair.
Yeah.
While all the other kids were, talking about rides and eating cotton candy, I would sit there and just watch this one particular artist who I thought was the best guy in the entire youth fair, in front of the double loop.
Oh,
remember the double loop?
Yeah.
It was always in the same spot.
Man.
And I would just watch this guy and try to pick up tips. Yeah.
Wow,
so I transferred over to photography, and then I like the Photoshops.
Can you still airbrush? No.
I'm horrible.
We got it. Oh, I love to see it.
Dabbled in the AI yet in Photoshop? Have they given you into that?
No, I haven't. I've seen what people are producing, but no, I haven't.
Actually, that's not on here, but I would love to talk about that in a few. But welcome. Usually we put the lights red because it's going to get hot in here with some hot seat questions on the podcast. We don't have a soundboard.
Right.
So anyways, I always want to ask you some scenarios, because we talk about visions, right? And now we could talk about some actions that you might take on some things, especially that as we see them all throughout the nation, even in South Florida, things that are happening, occurring. And then, if you were sheriff, how you would address some things. So let's go through it. What do you think, Jay? What do you think? Sure. Do you have some or no?
No, I have it.
I want to take the first one.
Go for it.
Because this is something that is all over social media, and when I see it, it boils my blood a little bit. And I know talking to civilians, it also boils their blood too. And we're talking about street takeovers. I don't know if you've seen them on social media.
Definitely, yes.
Or where it could be cars doing donuts in an intersection with no regard for civilians and other pedestrians and other vehicular traffic. It can be at an intersection on the highway, or it could be motorcycles. Now we have the bicycles taking over sometimes. But I want to focus on the cars and stuff that we're seeing on social media. So, not to saying that things aren't being addressed now, and I want to put that out there, but you're now sheriff. How would you go about, mitigating that, getting rid of these street takeovers and trying to prevent these things from happening?
Right. Well, so first of all, I think a lot of those street takeovers, first of all, let's go back. How dangerous is that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
would you say it's a public safety issue?
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
that they're actually shooting, they're throwing fireworks, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. How many videos have you seen where people within the same groups are getting hit by the car as it's doing the donut?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So we agree that it's super dangerous, but it's also a lot of those can be predicted because they're going around on social media.
Yes.
So we have to do, I think, a better job. And I'm not saying it's not being done. I'm just saying that we have to really make that a priority because it's becoming more and more common, right? And when we do find out that they're happening, we got to be more strategic on how we handle that. I'm going to give you a quick example. Years ago, I think it was during the 2016, riots and things that were happening. I was the captain in Northside, and we knew that within this park there was going to be some demonstrations. But we knew that, like in every other demonstration, it's totally legit. People are allowed to do it. In fact, we welcome it. We gave them the area to do it. But you know that there's the people that are come in and destroy the whole
instigators. They're gonna
Right. So back then, I gave a little speech or a briefing to our guys, and that was what we were going to do is we were going to open the area. We're going to have officers all over the place, and we were going to let them demonstrate. But the moment it got crazy, we were going to give everybody an evacuation warning, and we were going to let everybody leave. Everybody who wants to leave, go ahead and leave. But there's going to be a point where now they're no longer allowed to leave.
Yeah.
Kind of like, remember the movie?
Now you just can't leave.
Now you can't leave.
Yeah.
And I used that
Sunny.
analogy. I said, kind of like in the bar, first we want you to leave. Now you can't leave.
That's Bronx Tale.
Right.
And Sonny tells them to the bikers that were messing up the bar, now you just can't leave.
Right.
Just I'm a big fan of Bronx Tale. One of my favorite movies.
Exactly.
Continue, sir.
So I think in these street takeover things, what we got to do is we got to make it unacceptable to even be there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we got to do is we got to lock them up. And I don't mean lock them up in handcuffs. I mean literally lock them up, and everybody who is there has to be a lot more cars towed. There has to be, if there's walkers that are just filming, we'll arrest them for being in traffic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make it something where there's consequences to the actions. Because right now, what do? They go, we make 3 or 4 arrests, but everybody else that was there to that shared it on social media and basically occupied the entire street is walking away.
Yeah.
We need to make it something where everyone that's there partaking in it suffers from some kind of consequence, whether it's citation.
And Florida's getting on the page with that because there's
Spectator,
Florida law now where it's a felony to be a spectator. Felony,
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a felony to be a spectator and involved in it. The takeover. If your car's involved in it, you're getting a 30-day impound. It's not like a reckless driving charge
Right.
where your car's just getting impounded overnight, and it's a 30-day impound, and you have to pay the storage fees at the actual facility that's towing your car.
And that's what needs to happen.
So these people are really getting hit in the pocket
Right.
with what they're doing, and then they're getting those felony charges that but it's a matter of catching them.
The thing is, are they? It's there now. The resource for a law enforcement officer is having a law to enforce, and now the laws are made. So the question is, how do we go about, or how would you go about? And you were saying that we start enforcing those laws.
Right. Yeah, we have to enforce it, but we go back to what I said before: is we have to reprioritize the structure of the department and the assignments in the department. We have a lot of specialized units. We like to call them the acronym units that are running around, and they're not really set up in a way that we're getting a lot of use from them. Right.
Yeah.
We're not getting a lot of juice from a lot of those.
Well, the idea is there, and it's a good idea, but the execution might not be there.
Right, and that's my point. It's a well-intentioned program, but I always say we got to measure twice and cut once, right? And sometimes measuring twice means put the unit out, but there's got to be parameters by which you're going to measure the success of that unit, right? And I think that's where historically in law enforcement we failed.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you kind of learn in the private sector, right? You put something out, you look at it, and then you find a way to tap it into place, but you got to be constantly evaluating its success. And I think the same goes for assignments and developing new units. You have a new idea, you have a concept, let's try it. We'll try it. But if you're not getting the juice from the squeeze that you gave it, then we gotta adjust it. And so
some people can say that it's just traffic.
Yeah, but it's not. Think about the people are getting shot. Now they're shooting at cops. You have guys that
Shooting
are halfway.
fireworks, yeah.
Right. You have guys that are halfway in and out of the car with ARs shooting up in the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got guys that while they're doing donuts, they're hitting their own people.
Yeah.
Running them over, and they leave. They leave those
Yeah.
guys on the ground. So it's got to be something where there's like I said, there's repercussions for even being there.
Yeah.
Because the fact that it's pulling in and drawing spectators
Yeah.
is the problem. If nobody were there to witness it, they wouldn't be doing it.
No.
You see what I mean?
And then they're promoting it on social media. So
They are.
I would just add to what you were saying is that it started with street takeovers, and then it's like, hey, let's shoot fireworks because we're getting away with these street takeovers. Of
course.
Let's shoot a gun.
Right.
So and then now I don't know if it's there on social media to see. There has been incidents where officers arrive and they'll shoot a firework, which is a mortar shell, at the officer.
Directly at the officer, right.
And the officer, there was one incident where he was trying to effect an arrest. They shot a mortar shell. He was like, "Oh my god!" And the guy got away. He ended up scrambling and getting away because he just got something just exploded right near him.
Right.
So it is getting more dangerous. An officer's getting out of his car, kick the door of the officer, because I don't think that the consequences are being. It's something that the public is perceiving as this is lawlessness.
Right.
And there's yes, murders have to be addressed. Robberies, burglaries, things have to be addressed. But the perception is that what society are we living in right now that these people can just take over an intersection? Exactly. So as sheriff, I'm hoping that we come and we set a precedence where we're like, hey, by the way, this will be something great to put on social media.
Right.
They're on social media. Let's tap into there. I would love to do an operation with a department out there, and it's like it should be. Again, you're the sheriff, but in my thoughts, there's like definitely multi-agency task force put together because FHP is affected by these jokers as well. They're out there doing donuts on the highway, stopping the highway. Multi-agency task force, and I think
it's big stuff because a lot of times agencies got to use air, so you got to have air set up ready to go to
the beauty is we have in Miami-Dade we have a lot of resources.
Yeah, absolutely,
right? And we have a lot of staff, but we just have to, like I said, we have to realign and kind of target those type of scenarios because we do have the resources to deal with it, right? But there's got to be repercussions. It's like little kids. The little kid will look at you, they'll do one thing, and if they get away with it, what do? They do it a second time and do it more drastic, right? And they continue on. We've allowed those things to continue on, and through this whole anti-police idea. There's a lot of officers that are more hesitant to write a ticket, just get out of here, that kind of thing. So what happens is they become more brazen, and that's where we're at. To where now they're shooting fireworks at cops because nothing happened to them before. Yeah,
right? Absolutely. So I hope you get some of them little street racers. And you know what? The street racing has been around for a long time. Right. And they do it in the back, Okeechobee, and they do it at night or whatever. This is something now that's more brazen. Like we're in the middle of the intersection and nothing you could do about it. So.
And I think another danger to that, think about it, is there's crowd dynamics involved. Anywhere where there's large crowds of people that are all hyped up and yelling and doing all that stuff, it leads to other things. Yeah. Now these kids are armed. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So I did better donuts. No, and now there's an altercation, and there's a lot of people surrounding them. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's always dangerous when you have dynamic like that where the crowd is getting rowdier. They totally disrespect the police. Yeah. It's just a recipe for disaster.
All right. So moving on with large crowds. 2024, not only are you running for sheriff, but there's a presidential election. And if you go back through all the, starting when I keyed in on it, the 2016 election, when all of a sudden narratives started popping up and you saw a lot more. And if you pay attention to the news, you'll see a lot of anti-police sentiment. You'll see altercations between officers and civilians, and then the news running with the stories. And not to say that these stories are not bad or there's nothing bad happens. A lot of times someone loses their life, and that's unfortunate and that's sad, but the news just sets a fire to this stuff. What we saw in 2016 was riots. Fast forward to the 2020, you see it affected now came here. In 2016, we worked with the protesters, gave them an avenue, and we actually escorted them as let's go. You want to go? Let's go.
Right.
And they did it by, there was no, nothing aggressive, just protesting and voicing their concerns, and they have every right to do that. 2020 thought that was going to be the same kind of situation. Let's escort them, but then you had the bad actors in there, and it stepped up that level. So what my concern is, here comes 2024, and believe it or not, police incidents happen all the time. It just don't make the national stage. Around the election time, you'll see it all of a sudden. They get blasted everywhere.
Right.
2024 is coming. There's around that time we might have some stuff. What are you thinking? Like, how would you address a situation similar? And let's say you make it 2024, and then you're maybe this stuff has already passed, but 2028 there's another election, so you'll be sheriff at that time. So how would you address something similar to the 2020 situation where we had protesters, people throwing things and getting upset, and how would you go about mitigating something like that? Right. From happening?
Well, first of all, there's the acknowledgement that it is totally 100% legal to protest.
Yep.
And we know that, right? The issue is, and we learned this during the 2020, that a lot of the protesters that were coming in here that were the most disruptive were not from here.
Not at all.
And there's a couple stories, and maybe I shouldn't because some of them were intelligence-based, but a lot of our community, our very own community, knew that they were coming from the outside, right? And so I think I say this all the time. We have our issues and challenges in Miami.
Yeah.
But I think Miami community comes together, and they did. And I don't want to get too far into that, but I will say this: we're going to allow people to protest because they have a right to do it. We're going to even facilitate it. We're going to give them the area. We're going to give them and we're going to give them very, very specific briefings on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Part of what ended up happening historically is we'd come out with Bearcats and and the water cannons and everything else, and we looked really aggressive with riot gear and everything else. What I would do is I'm going to put everybody. We're going to have uniform patrol there. They're going to be dressed just like uniform cops, and we're going to allow them to protest. And we are going to be prepared. We are going to have Bearcats. We are going to have the RDF teams, but they're not going to be visible there to incite issues, right? But the moment things start to go out of whack, those teams are coming in, because we can't allow, again, and especially in those situations, it's crowd dynamics. It's usually one guy that starts it.
Yep.
1 to 5 guys. Then it turns into 10 to 12, and the crowd starts to feed off each other. Then it's 20 and 30, and those are how those things occur. So what we got to do is we got to let people vent. We got to let people demonstrate. We got to let people exercise their amendment rights, but we're not going to let them get out of control, and we're going to neutralize it quickly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think we were really, really hesitant to do early on. And we saw that all through the country. And other people let it go too far.
The temperature at those protests, super high.
Right.
Because it's not a protest about a Venezuelan president.
Mm-hmm.
It is an anti-police protest.
Right.
And who's out there to help with the crowd is police.
Right.
So a lot of the rhetoric is directed towards officers, and it's just can go south at a spit. Somebody spits at an officer. Officer's like, "You're not spitting at me today, buddy.
Right.
Let's go." Has to go into the crowd, and then it becomes chaos.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that by the time you have the protest, it's too late to put a Band-Aid on it then.
Yeah.
We got to fix those relationships before the protest.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I know, I agree.
So we have to be able to, look, I'll give you an example. Acknowledgements that we haven't always been doing it right? I was the taser subject matter expert. It's related, but not directly related, but it is. We started looking at tasers. We never did a good job, because when I told my captain and major at the time, I said, look, we have a new taser device. Let's bring in the media. Let's bring in the public, these community groups, and tell them what it is that we're doing. Because, it's in the media, all it says is 50,000 volts of electricity. The temperament at the time was arms crossed. We don't invite the media here. We don't tell the public anything. We don't teach tactics. We're going to do what we do. I'm like, well, it's not the smartest way to go, but okay. I'm only a sergeant at the time. Yeah. Well, we had the 6-year-old incident. We had the 12-year-old incident. We had a pregnant female incident. We had several challenges, right? And then Finally, I was able to talk to our director at the time, Bobby Parker, who I'd run into a burning building for. I thought he was awesome. And I told him, look, I think we need to front load all of this before we have these issues again. Let's bring the media in. And we did. Willard Shepard came in. And I ended up exposing him to the taser. He became a big proponent of it once he understood it. And so what I'm trying to say is all the media and the community understood is that we were out there deploying tasers with 50,000 volts of electricity.
Yeah.
What they didn't know was why.
Yeah.
Right? And more important than what you're doing is why we're doing it. Why are we investigating tasers and deploying them? Because we're trying to reduce the number of police-involved shootings. We're trying to save lives. That was and once people understood that, then they started, So what I'm trying to tell you is we gotta enhance relationships before the crisis.
Yeah.
And what we saw there, if you notice, Miami didn't get really crazy because the people that were causing that were coming from other places.
Yeah.
I mean, there were pallets of bricks being delivered to churches, and then people trying to pay our own neighborhood kids, here's $100 if you go throw bricks at the cops.
That's confirmed?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. No.
100%.
It is.
I just wanted you to say you're not just making this up.
No, I didn't make it up.
No.
And as a matter of fact, there was a community group that said, hey, this is happening here.
Yeah.
Can you do something? And we're like, well, they haven't broken the law yet. So we're going to monitor, but there's nothing we can do. And they said, oh, wait. Oh, you can't do, don't worry, we'll do something.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I heard
and that's why I say our Miami-Dade community, we have our challenges.
Yeah.
But there are challenges.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we work together to fix these things. And so
I think that's huge, and that is absolutely 1,000% true. That when it was happening, it's like, man, but our relationship with our community, yeah, in the past, and it could be everything can be improved, but we're pretty good. So when we see cars going up on fire, like, wait, this can't be our community. Mm-hmm. And you see how quickly how the sentiment was the national narrative, and people were like, yes, we agree with that, and they went out there, and then stuff started happening local, and they're like, whoa, we don't agree with that.
Exactly.
And you can see everybody online switching and like, yo, we're not with that.
Right.
Keep that out of here. Go send that back somewhere else. And you could see that's why it did ignite, but the fire was put out really fast.
Really quickly.
Yeah, really fast, because we're not about that. Miami wasn't about that.
Right. Yeah, I think, and especially with the confusion with the sheriff's office, this needs to be something where, and it's something that I've always believed in, is let's bring in the most argumentative people that we know. Let's bring them in. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, people actually will be much more tolerant of decisions that police make if they understand the rationale behind a decision. They don't have to agree with the decision, but they have to understand the rationale. And that's one of the things that I've always been able to do in my career, being a trainer and everything else. I mean, we'd have to go to community groups where there was a person shot by police, and there is video cameras, there's a church, there's the family of the person shot by the police. And I'd get up and explain the shooting and have that very same family walk up and say, hey, Sarge, or hey, Lieutenant, whatever I was at the time. Hey, Lieutenant, we didn't know it happened that way. Thank you so much. Our prayers are with the family of the officers, right? Or our prayers are with the officer. So humans are much more understanding and more rational when they understand what the challenges are going to be before it happens.
You know what the issue becomes is that if on law enforcement, if we don't educate and let them understand what's going on, there's somebody will come along and tell our own story,
of course,
and say, no, this is why. I know for sure this is why. And a lot of times they're wrong. They're just filling in the gap. And if it makes sense, that's what it is.
Well, isn't that the story behind body-worn cameras when you think about it?
Yeah.
The reason why we went to body-worn cameras wasn't to be Big Brother and all this other stuff. No, it's because the reason is cops are doing the right thing 99% of the time. And yes, we falter. Yes, we make mistakes. We've talked about that, right? But it's really the body-worn camera was to protect the public from the officer, but mostly to protect the officer from the public.
Yeah.
To have evidence capabilities on the officer all the time.
Yeah. Tell the whole story instead of having a snippet.
Exactly.
Well,
we talked about that on the show, right? We didn't talk about that on break, right?
What's that?
Body-worn cameras?
No, I don't know. I think
we talked about it off break.
I'm gonna move along, and we do have something similar with the body-worn camera stuff that I'm going to get to. But first, let's talk about as sheriff. I know in Broward County there was we had Marjorie Stoneman Douglas that happened, and as a result of some tactical failures and some policy failures, actually the sheriff of that Broward was removed from office. So, moving forward, school shootings, active shooter, active killer doesn't have to be school; could just be anywhere, as we see throughout the nation. What is your plan to, help prevent, better train, provide tools to the officers? What's your plan on that?
I chaired the mass casualty attack program for Miami-Dade County, and I wasn't told to do it. So, and it was, let's put it this way, while Marjorie Stoneman was physically happening, we were sitting in a room discussing and coming up with our active shooter protocol. So what ended up happening was somewhere along the line, I developed, at the training bureau, we saw the deficiency that the department had in terms of response to active shooters. Everybody thinks an active shooter is a SWAT call out. It is absolutely the last people that are going to be there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
An active shooter, or in our case, we called it a mass casualty attack, and that's a different subject, but that is totally 100% uniform patrol call.
Yeah.
Whoever is the first person there needs to start addressing it, and everything should be in furtherance of stopping that incident, right? But what ended up happening was we started looking at deficiencies, and we bought about, at the time, it was like 1,800 patrol rifles, because obviously a lot of these guys have AR-15s and assault rifles that they're using. So we ended up having to arm them to where at least they can be comparable with the shooters. Then I realized, okay, we have the offensive component, we don't have the defensive component. So if the guy shoots at the police, we don't have body armor and ballistic protection that'll protect them. So we ended up going out and buying the most high-speed ballistic protection that we found that's capable of stopping a sniper rifle, right? And we armed them with that. And then we said, okay, we have the offensive part, we have the defensive part, but we have to update the policies. Because as we know, in Columbine, we learned that, and by the way, what happened in Columbine was 100% acceptable for the time. It used to be that if there was a situation that uniform patrol couldn't handle, who do they call?
SWAT.
Yeah.
But guess what? It takes a while. And so it took a long time, and that response was, I think we all realized, was totally deficient and we'll just say was wrong at the time. Then we went to, well, we got to do a diamond formation.
Yeah.
4 cops go in. Well, no, we can't wait for the 4th cop if he's 2 minutes away and there's shots being fired. Whoever's there needs to go.
Yeah.
Right. And so we started moving these things around in our heads. And I said, all right, we got to put together a group. And I brought in, like I said, the most argumentative guys that I know that have a background in that, because I believe an active shooter scenario is probably about 70% incident command, maybe 60% incident command, 30% medical, and 10% tactics. I mean, that's the reality. That's how I feel. We have to oversimplify this. So I put out a memo for the department, and we started the methodology of very first thing we got to do. There's 2 things. Number 1 is stop the killing, and number 2 is stop the dying. And so we totally revamped the entire program, and I chaired that. And like I said, I wasn't told to do it. I just saw the deficiency in the department, brought in a really good group. It's the first time that a policy was written that was not specific to just Miami-Dade Police. But we brought in a fire chief also. We brought in our dispatchers. And we came up with what we think is probably a national model, a really good national model. And so after that, or directly after that, the department toyed with the idea of putting together a specific team, which initially I didn't think was going to work. And it's a team called the Priority Response Team, PRT. Mm-hmm. So I developed, myself and the team, the mass casualty attack team, developed the program for PRT, and we put them out and deployed them. I think it's a system that works. I didn't think it was going to work initially, but then later on I go to Kendall, and every time PRT was dispatched, I verified what was the dispatch time, what time did they arrive, to see the...
Can you just explain what that is?
Like, what would they do?
So basically, the Priority Response Team was set up in a way that there was some north, there was some south, they work in teams, and they're going to be on or around areas where there are schools, right? Okay. Or high profile incidents where active shooters would
malls,
right.
And things like
Remember what an active shooter is trying to do. I mean, the definition of an active shooter, if you want to, just shorten it really quick and simplify it, they're trying to kill as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time.
Yep.
And so wherever you see large gatherings, wherever you see big groups and soft targets, that's where they're going to go. And so that's where PRT is kind of patrolling around. And the concept is they're very well trained, they're very well equipped, and the concept is once it happens, they'll be there between 1 and 2 minutes, because most of these active shooter scenarios last about 6 minutes. Between the time the guy exposes himself and starts shooting to the last round, it's on average about 6 minutes. So how do we get resources there? And the PRT team or the unit was developed for that. After looking at their response times, remember I said you got to measure twice and cut once, and you got to continuously evaluate. I started to evaluate the program and realize, you know what, it is working. It's a lot more effective than I thought it was going to be. The problem.
How would you measure that?
What I was really looking at is the only parameter that I can really measure was from the time the call went out, how long did it take them to get there?
And did they respond to every call or only certain?
Only what was considered like hot calls. That was the
calls.
Initial concept behind this unit, right?
Okay.
So they don't write reports. They get there. It's the unit or the scene is stabilized. It's good. Then they leave and uniform comes and handles it. So that's the concept. The issue with it is, I think, from what I'm hearing again, and this is it would be irresponsible for me to say that this is happening, but from what I'm hearing, their resources are being moved elsewhere now. Whenever there's some, I don't know, whatever, let's make it a press conference or something, they want them there. That's not what they're supposed to be. That's not where they're supposed to be. If we're gonna stay along the lines of what they're supposed to be doing, they should be continuing to be where they're supposed to be to respond to these things with a really rapid response. And I think that they're being used around in different areas just because they're well trained. So send them there.
So that's what you mean by like reorganizing and just kind of calibrating the positions and stuff. So like this would be one of your things. Like, hey, yes, how often does a mass casualty event happen?
Right.
But if it does, these people better be where they're supposed to be.
Exactly. Right. You can't rest on your laurels and go, well, we have a press conference, let's put the PRT guys there for the camera. No, that's not where they're supposed to be. They're not poster boys.
Yeah.
They are what we're going to use at the absolute worst moments, and they need to be prepared and ready, and they need to be primed for it. And in the area where they're supposed to be.
All right. So I like it. Here we go. New gun law. Are you up on this? Up on this craziness?
Yeah.
In the Wild Wild West of Florida? No.
July 1st.
July 1st just went through. So before you needed a permit to carry a concealed firearm, and now it's permitless carry. You don't need a permit to carry a concealed firearm. You can now carry it in any place that was permitted with the concealed weapons permit.
Right.
The problem is the education thing that I have is like, if you take the permit class, you know these locations. If now anybody can carry it, and now they don't know. Oh, I'm not allowed to carry here. So, anyways, how do you think that's going to affect you? Do you see it as a problem moving forward?
Right. Well, so let's first, in order to really look at that and evaluate it, you got to know what's in place. You got to know what was in place before that.
Right.
And really, the only thing that changed is there was kind of an acknowledgement that was what was necessary to obtain the license was so minimal, and so depending on who you go to, because it was so minimal that, for example, you can be a firearms instructor and run a program for that, and you can make them shoot a course, you can make them go through this many hours, and you can say, for my certification, you're going to need this.
Yeah.
But there were other guys that followed the minimum, which is shoot one round from a 22 in a bucket. Bah, okay, you're certified. Good.
Yeah.
And it became a stamp, right? It was like a cookie cutter thing where they were just making more money. And so I think first the law didn't change in the sense of who can have a gun.
Yeah.
All that it was they acknowledge, okay, look, the people are not really getting trained. You know what I mean? Depending on who you go to. Obviously, there are trainers that were good, but a lot of the trainers were just cookie cutter, assembly line, make money for the certification and go, right? And so part number one is they weren't really getting much training anyway. So the rationale behind the law was let's get rid of the training requirement. Other than that, you still have to you cannot be a convicted felon. You got to be over 21. All those rules change. You cannot carry it into a sporting event. You cannot carry it into private property.
Yeah, you still
all
have to
those
get a
things.
background check to buy a firearm.
Right. To purchase a gun and be in possession, any sort of possession of it, all the laws remain the same. right? Now, as far as law enforcement, obviously, statistically speaking, we're going to confront more people with firearms.
Yeah.
But it's not going to change the way we respond to people because we train that everyone is armed anyway.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Said it 100 times leading up to that.
Yeah. So I feel that, the concept was the training is low anyway, and we want more people to be able to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where that lies.
Okay. I mean, I think you're on. I got when the new law was coming, and one of my neighbors saw me. He said, "Yeah, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to affect law enforcement now? It's going to be crazy."
Yeah.
And I kind of gave him the same answer that you did. Is like, well, the law is kind of like the same. And when we encounter people, we always think they have a firearm on them, anyways. And we do that because you don't want to be taken by surprise if they do.
Right.
So I'm already assuming until I can clear your waistband, your ankles, your butt crack. No, I'm just kidding. But
Pockets.
until I can clear any part of your body that you can conceal a firearm, I assume that you have a firearm.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
if you do and I didn't, well, then that's not good for me or my family.
You know, a scenario that I used to always give in training is one of the most common calls, but could be the absolute worst call you could ever go to is a 911 hang-up.
Yeah.
So that means that someone called the police, and at some point, they turned it off. So it could be, most of the time, kids playing with phones.
Yeah.
But it could be Jeffrey Dahmer in there.
Yeah.
And somebody got to the phone and he
Yeah.
cut it out, right? And so I used to give an analogy all the time, and that was that cops always have to be prepared and measure up and expect people to try to kill you, right?
Yeah.
So I would always say, you get to the 911 call, you knock on the door, you step back, you don't put yourself directly in the floor, but you're between the door frame and the window. Because rounds may go through, and then the door opens, and we're in Miami, so a Cuban grandmother with a bate casa, right? And she looks at you and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's my 7-year-old is playing with the phone." And you go and you look at her and you size her up and you say, "Okay, don't worry, do me a favor, go in there and get him."
Yeah.
But you're looking at every corner of the house, waiting for the shots to come off. And then all of a sudden, a little 7-year-old comes out with no shirt and Spider-Man underwear.
Yeah.
And he comes up, "Oh, I love the police," and he comes to give you a hug. And after you size him up, you go and you give him a hug and you take a selfie with him. But you always have to expect that a gun is going to come out of somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think it's going to change police response. I don't think it's going to change police interactions. We always feel that way. All it's going to do is, statistically, I think it's going to have us confront more people that say, "Hey, just so you know, I'm armed."
And to your point, if somebody's listening that doesn't understand that, and they've never been in law enforcement, like, man, that sounds like you want all these officers to be super nervous around somebody. Man, you're gonna get somebody shot. On the contrary, if you're prepared, you're more likely to be prepared for what's happening and mitigate something
Exactly.
and prevent that from happening. Whereas if you got caught off guard, you might be more apt to pull and use
Overreact.
Yeah, overreact.
Right.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and a lot of people don't know. And I've had this conversation before, and this goes back to communication, right? And what we have to explain to the public, because people just don't know, and that is, well, why was the cop so strict? Why was he so stern? Well, if you remember, in the 70s, they did a study, and they grabbed a bunch of cop killers that were on death row for murdering cops. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was either Caliber Press or somebody who did this.
This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
So tell me, in the 70s, what happened?
So what ended up happening was they did this study and they interviewed all these cop killers, and the why'd you do it? Why did you kill the cop? And the ongoing the common denominator that they continued to say was, well, the officer didn't look assertive. His uniform was disheveled. He didn't take control. He looked kind of passive. It looked easy. Yeah. And so I did it. And so after that, if you remember, I learned in the academy, hey, always look assertive, always look in control, never look flustered.
Yeah.
And there was a term used at the time, fake it if you must, but look professional and look good.
Make it look good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when a lot of the public says, why was he so stern? He didn't smile. Well, he's faking it.
Yeah.
He's got to fake it because he doesn't know when you know what I mean? And so those are little things that I think a lot of members of the community don't realize. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
And most cops have to present themselves that way because they need to look more in control than they actually are, because how control are we really? How much in control are we really?
Yeah.
You know?
You gotta hope that the person is a law-abiding citizen,
Of
is in
course.
fear of going to jail, or just doesn't want confrontation. But if you get somebody that does not check any of those boxes,
Right.
you gotta handle business.
Boogie.
A well-trained cop, is probably going to be the most composed and the most professional and have the bandwidth to make the best decisions.
Yeah.
That's why training is so important.
Yep. Massaging that OODA loop.
There you go.
Yeah, and we could talk about it later. You know what I want to do is, because we can keep going and going and going, and we're going to. We got one more scenario, and then we're gonna wrap it up. But we got to have you back. I mean,
Yes.
this is you're 2 months in now, and you're gonna continue going and doing different interviews. You got to come back. Don't get too big now.
No problem.
Don't get
I'll
too
be
big.
back. I'll be
We're
back.
holding them here.
This is actually fun.
All
He's got a
right.
year till the primaries. We're recording this in August 23.
Yeah.
He said August the 24 is the primary
Yeah.
season.
So we're gonna have you back on, and I would assume that there's gonna be presume. I can think that there's going to be a lot of questions for you in the comment section. So if you have questions and you want to ask, we're going to have them back on. So put those questions down in the comment section. And here we go. The last question for the scenario here: accountability of officers. Right? With body worn cameras, we're getting a better look at situations that may have been snippets on somebody else's cell phone that made rounds on social media. The question is that these situations in police work rarely look pretty. The police work is not pretty. It's
Very
ugly.
true.
If somebody doesn't want to go to jail and you have to take them to jail, things can get ugly.
Yes.
And that's just the nature of the beast. And to a person that maybe doesn't understand policy procedure, is ignorant to the laws, and just doesn't understand, they're going to label whatever they see as whatever they perceive it to be,
course.
or whatever the narrative is out there is. You guys are abuse of power.
Right.
You guys are not allowed to do that. I know my rights. So how do you plan? Because this stuff is going to be on social media, and it's going to happen. It's always going to happen. Whenever there's somebody got to go to jail and they don't want to go to jail, this is going to happen in 2024 and 28 and 30 and so on and so forth until AI takes over. So the thing is, how do you plan as a sheriff on balancing that and not like what we mentioned before, just not jumping to a conclusion to appease somebody, knowing that, hey, actually the officer, you were the guy who was use of force policymaker. This guy was abiding by the policy, and this is what we trained him to do. Whereas, and then now you have the body-worn camera where you can view the entire footage, but it's going to take you some time. But in the meanwhile, you have a crowd out in front of you. How do you plan on handling a situation like that?
So first because that's kind of what I did for a very long time. So there's so many ways to unpack that. There's so many directions that I can go, just historically talking about body-worn cameras and how they came about and how they were recognized as effective. But then there's also I'll tell you what I did in Miami-Dade and what we need to redo because it's not being done right now. And that is this. So we ended up I ended up developing a database. Now, I'm not the one that developed it. I'm the one that kind of scripted and said, this is what I want to capture. And I had a really talented guy who he's retired, a guy named Vic Gattel, who started building it. And then he started adding more stuff. The more he learned about use of force, the more he added. And then we came up with what was eventually reviewed by the Police Executive Research Forum as what should be a national standard. And we were doing that in Miami-Dade, and this is 15 years ago, right? And so now you hear people say there should be a national database. Well, we had it 15 years ago, and we had it. And so let me explain what I mean. I developed a concept, and about 50 agencies, I came up with it about a year ago, and it was a deficiency in the way we capture stats. I'll give you an example. When you capture a stat, you know the use of force, right? And by the way, when you talk about use of force, there's 4 different contexts of use of force. Number 1, there's a use of force, the technique. Number 2, there's a use of force, the Fourth Amendment, the law. Number 3, there's the policy. And number 4, there's the report. So you can literally say, you can hear someone say, and it wouldn't be wrong for him to say, Well, I had a use of force, but it wasn't a use of force, so we didn't do a use of force. Does that make sense? And what that means is I had a use of force, meaning that it was a Fourth Amendment seizure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a use of force because it didn't meet the criteria for investigation, supervisory investigation, and therefore I didn't write the report.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
and so within that context, I told you we can go on a rabbit hole in this.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is I developed a database where on traditional databases, they go off of the data in the cover sheet. So what that means is you have a case number, you have a subject, you have, and we capture things like, black male officer, white female subject, and we capture those kind of things. But there's just check boxes, right? And the check boxes, for example, was a taser used? Yes, but let me give you the scenario. The scenario is the female that was driving a stolen car jumped out of the car. The officer tried to tase her. The taser missed altogether. She jumped over the fence, crossed the street, and got hit by an 18-wheeler. Just an example.
Yeah.
Well, by the mere fact that the checkbox of taser was checked, that's now a taser-related death.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we were capturing.
It doesn't make sense, but I follow.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the limitations of the way. It's the limitations of the vehicle that you've built to capture the data.
Yeah.
And so we said, no. We got to start capturing incidents within the incident.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, I went like that. She jumped out of the car. I deployed my taser. I missed. That incident is over. She continued to run. She jumped over the fence. I grabbed her foot. She kicked me in the face. She got away. That incident is over. Now she went in traffic and got hit by a car, right? So you could have potentially, under one case number, you can have 7 incidents.
Yeah.
And what we did was we started to capture what application of force was effective and what application of force wasn't. And that became really important. But one of the other things that became really important is this. I came up with not just de-escalation, but a force avoidance framework that I know that over 50 agencies have adopted, and that is this. We in law enforcement, we capture what happened, but we never capture what didn't happen, right? And what didn't happen is just as important, right? And so what if I went up to you, I said, sir, you're under arrest. And I was totally and 100% justified in using force because you wiped your face, you kicked off your shoes, you cracked your knuckles, you went like this and looked at me and you took a swing and I ducked. I could have hit. And all of a sudden I say, sir, do me a favor. I know your kids. Put your hands behind your back. Oh, you know my kids. And the guy turns around and I handcuff him. Well, the fact that we were totally justified to use force and didn't because we generated voluntary compliance at that moment is never captured. We don't write that report.
Yeah.
And that report is much more important than the one almost that we did because now you as an officer, you have 2 police shootings, right?
Yeah.
And because you happen to work RID or you happen to work SWAT in an area where the department kind of puts you in in those compromising positions where you may have to, you're more likely, right? So the media will turn around and say, well, this officer shot 2 people. That's not normal for law enforcement when law enforcement, most of them never shoot their gun. So statistically it's accurate, but it's not really relevant. And what would be relevant at that moment is for me to be able to say, no, wait a minute. This officer did have 2 shootings, but he's also had 17 incidents, force avoidance incidents where he was totally justified to use force and didn't.
Is that a thing, force avoidance incidents?
It's a framework. It's a framework that I developed about a year ago. Yes. And so what I mean by that is, the same way we write applications of force, why are we not documenting incidents where we avoided force? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it adds a better landscape and it gives us a lot more information. It's got to be something quick because if not, people won't write it.
Yeah.
It's got to be something quick and easy that we can, like a 1-page thing. And it's also got to be reviewed by a supervisor because you don't want an officer to say, I have 100 per day.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Because it could be. That's what I'm saying. There's got to be some kind of criteria where it meets the standard where it could have happened. And otherwise, I pulled this lady over. I said, license and registration. She said, why? And I could have punched her in the face.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did it.
Or you can also say, driving on the street, I issued 7 warnings just because I drove with my lights on for a little while and people slowed down.
So, no, but
so of course, there's we can talk about what the parameters are within that.
We get it.
But you understand.
But you have that in place where it's like this has to meet a standard.
It has. It's got to be. It's got to be effective in capturing what it is that we're trying to capture.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But also what happens is a lot of times in training, we go and we teach them things, right? When we train them, but we're not teaching them how to avoid confrontations.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is an example. But one of the things that works about that system is it actually incentivizes officers not to use force. You know what I mean? Because it used to be, if you remember, in the state of Florida, we used to have the use of force matrix. Remember that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not there anymore? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, what's interesting is years ago, I'm a sergeant. And
So what, real quick, can we just
Yes.
glaze over it? What is the use of force matrix?
So the use of force matrix was a guideline, right? It was a graphic that showed you what the subject is doing and what you're allowed to do in response.
Yes.
Right. And so the guy's standing there and he's being, whatever, he's doing this. And now it allowed you to look at the box and say, check, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
But that was too robotic.
Yeah.
And that allowed officers to get away with using more force than they needed for that particular situation because it checked the box.
Because it said I could go
Exactly.
I could go in and up to striking him with a baton.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When
And so exactly my point. And so the issue is we got to have policies that allow the officer to make decisions based on what they're seeing at the time, not just a guideline based on check boxes. And so, but what's interesting about that, even while I was a sergeant, I had to explain to a chief one day, we're sitting in a meeting and I had to explain to a chief when he says, yeah, but the use of force matrix says this, and he wasn't allowed to do that. And I said to him, yeah, sir, I appreciate that, but that's not our policy. What do you mean it's not our policy? No, not only is it not our policy, it's never been the policy of the Miami-Dade Police Department. Well, then why do we? Well, it's a guideline from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but it was never our policy. So it took a long time when I was a sergeant and going through the ranks to explain to people that our policy is what's written in the departmental manual, not what's given in training to receive your state certification, because that's the state requirement.
Yeah.
And Miami-Dade Police and every other agency within that, within the state can kind of compress, right? Or limit and make the policies a lot more strict.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of issues on use of force. I think when I left, we had a really good policy. I knew it back and forth. There wasn't an element in there that I didn't.
Did you know the guy who helped write that policy? Hey now, of course.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we would sit in a committee and we would have our legal bureau in there, and we kind of went through every scenario that you can think of. But
so to rewind, you got a crowd out there. Your officer, it didn't look good on what the camera showed of the what's going around social media. But now you got the whole story and you understand there's a missing element, and that's what happened with this officer.
Right.
What are you doing with that?
We get up in front of the media and in front of the community and explain it, because bad news doesn't get better with age.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's something that the officer messed up in, we got to address it. We got to address it immediately before it continues to fester.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you look at a lot of these incidents and a lot of the things that happen somewhere else in the country, what happens is officers or departments tend to withhold the video and they don't want to show it. It's an open investigation. And it's like, wait a minute. Once it's captured, right? If it's not affecting the case and it's not affecting the outcome of the case, you should release the video.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's not like they can manipulate the video later as long as you have it. The problem that we get into is trying to give statements either too early or withholding it and giving it too late.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We got to be responsible. We got to be measured, but we got to be upfront and we got to be honest about what it is that we saw.
Yeah.
Right. But we gotta get in front of the media as early as possible once we have the picture painted well.
Did you know that we and I'm sure I don't know what you guys do at your respective agencies or your former, but we used to get ahead of if we were going to arrest an officer for doing something wrong and there was an investigation, we would break the news ourselves on social media before the news got wind of it.
Right.
And it usually would kill the story before, because the news wants to break it and turn it into a thing. If you come out and just say what it is, it's like a kid that gets in trouble.
Right.
You're going to you may get a little smack, but it's not going to be as bad if you lie and it festers, you know what I mean? Or withhold, not lie, but you withhold information. And all of a sudden it comes to a point. So,
well, yeah, we go back. I think the public is not naive.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The public just doesn't want to feel lied to, and they want to feel like you're not withholding information. And so if it's bad news, it's not going to get better with age. It's going to come out. Address it immediately.
Yeah.
If it's good news, even faster if I could.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, they want to be informed.
Yeah.
It is one of the things that I said to my wife last night. We were watching TV, and it was old times, and the news broke into the program in the show, and they told you the news.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I just looked at it and I kind of like shook my head and I'm like, God, could you imagine? Look at you. You're sitting on the couch right here with your phone in your lap.
Yeah.
If that had happened then, you know, we in the show we watched how the president and everybody's talking about it and discussing how it's going to go out and what are you going to wear and doing all this stuff. And I go, you would have already known this if it was 2023,
Right.
because it'd be on your phone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the president's wearing. Should he wear a sweater versus a suit because it's too early in the morning?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I go, you would already know it.
Yeah.
And the president is just re-informing you of basically what you've already been informed of through
That's
social media and video and the internet.
That is-
so that's a whole nother podcast about public information and
Yeah, but that's when we started the idea behind social media. Law enforcement is always slow to the game for anything.
Yeah,
Like,
I
we
agree.
are not cool at all. You know what I mean? So we were like, we understood there was all these. If you look at 2016, all these riots and everything, they started on social media, but these departments weren't on it, so they don't know what's going on. So it's like, hey, we need to be on social media. If there's a discussion going on,
Right.
as a law enforcement officer or chief or sheriff, your community is somewhere talking. Well, you need to be a part of that conversation. Right. And we're catching up. I believe in today's world for social media, thank God, law enforcement is catching up, and mostly every agency is on social media. There's a conversation, and they understand the power of social media. There's a conversation there. It's just now they have to get a little bit better at production and stuff like that. But social media is huge in law enforcement, and I hope as sheriff you continue and reinforce that.
Definitely necessary.
And take it to new levels. There was something on here that was the end of the scenarios, and you did good. You did good.
Thank you.
There is something, and I don't even I just wanted to ask you something, and you don't have to go too far. But we're talking about AI. I don't know if how far along you are with AI. And the way that it's implicated or technology is implicated into law enforcement community. And I just by sitting as a free thinker and a guy who looks back at the big picture and says, where are we going? Because recruitment's down across the nation, and it could be because of the sentiment and everything, and maybe just generations like, nah, not for me. I don't want to do law enforcement. But there's going to be crime. People aren't going away. So how do we fill that void? And right now it's like we got to recruit even harder. At one point they're going to hit a wall and say we can't figure. So technology is going to come and start implementing itself into and we see it today already with real-time crime centers, with the ability to have cameras all around your community and review footage, and officers that are responding to scenes, getting real-time information saying there's a vehicle, there's a person here, from the person looking at there's a person on the corner there and they're hiding behind the bush because I see it on the camera as the officer responds to the scene. So this stuff is actually helping law enforcement. Do you see yourself, or do you have a little thing in the back of your head saying, I got to do all this stuff, but I need to start moving forward with technology. And when I become sheriff, I want to start, progressing with that form of policing with technology and getting advanced with the stuff. And I hope by the end of my career, there's the windshield that's just stolen vehicle, and it has LPRs on the screen, but your windshield's doing everything. It'd be pretty cool. But do you see yourself with implementing more technology and using it?
So first, it's funny. You said I was going to be in the hot seat during the scenario. I was
Yeah.
fine. It's hot now.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Now it's
AI.
taking
Now
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I think we have to go along with the times. Obviously, ShotSpotter is really big.
Yeah.
The real-time crime center is a vital aspect of policing. But this is why I have an issue with the politics being involved in the policing. Several years ago, we were looking at facial recognition software. That's going to simplify a lot. It's going to tie up a lot of or untie a lot of time and resources on building a lineup and doing all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And we didn't move to it, even though there were bids and there were different vendors looking at it and a really high success rate. And it was going to minimize a lot of investigative time and a lot of, like I said, investigative resources. And yet we didn't go with it because they didn't feel politically that we should look at facial recognition and investigative tools that will make our job easier in investigating criminals.
Right.
So, I have a problem with that, and it was done for political reasons, right?
Yeah.
So I do feel that we definitely, number one, need to be independent of the political influences there. But number two, think about it. Why did we not go to that? Like, how can anybody be against the idea that if I use facial recognition software and it narrows it down by 87%, I'm making up numbers.
Right.
All statistics are made up on the spot. I just made that one up, right? But the reality is, if it makes the job easier for us to identify, and not by 100%, but by a good enough margin that now I'm looking at 4 people instead of 1,000, why are we not looking at that?
Yeah.
Right. And I think in law enforcement, like everything else, look, we were pretty late into going into CADs.
What is CAD?
The
Computer-aided
computer-aided dispatch. Our laptops in our police car.
Yeah, no, I know.
We-
I just want to.
Yeah. We were. Yeah, you got to remind me that.
Yeah.
But we were pretty late. If you look at the rest of the industry, we were pretty late at getting them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think in law enforcement, that was us in Miami-Dade at the time. But in law enforcement, we're generally pretty late at adopting everything else.
Yeah.
Now there's legal implications to it, so we got to make sure it works. But we have to continue with technology. We have to.
Yeah.
Right.
The pushback and the sentiment is just Big Brother. They're watching everything, and in a way, our phones and things they're doing it,
Right.
and there's a capability for it to be done, but there's a balance between somebody's privacy and what's the expectation of privacy, and how are you going to scan my face, and that goes back with like license plate readers and things like that.
Right.
How you just scan my tag, and how do you know this? It's against the law. What rule? What was your PC for the stop? So there's a. I think more than anything, it just has to be communicated on how it would be, because the moment you say facial recognition technology, everyone's going to be like, they're scanning our faces. It's like, they're already scanning your faces everywhere. Your face is everywhere. It's just now that there's a crime that has been committed, and this is a resource that we're going to use to help bring this person who committed the crime to justice.
Right.
We don't care if you're walking on the sidewalk. I don't care if you're, just playing in a park or doing something. That's not our concern. Our concern is when we're trying to find the person who robbed this person.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a number one. We would be using facial recognition when there's a crime.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it'd very likely be a felony or something, or a violent misdemeanor. But number two, don't abandon the technology. Just let's put things in place that make it acceptable for us to use it. But don't just not adopt the technology because you don't like it. Now it becomes a policy issue. Well, under what scenario can we use the technology that we have?
Right.
And I think it's like, like you remember in the 80s, everybody said, hey, run this tag for me.
Yeah.
We don't do that. And now, we didn't have that in the 80s, but now every time you run a tag, that's recorded, that's logged. Like, you have to justify that.
What you meant by that is people used to call.
Friends. Yeah, friends would
Hey, I got
call
a
you.
police officer friend. Hey, man, can you run this tag for me? I'm thinking my girlfriend's cheating on me, and there's
Exactly.
a tag out. I want to know who's there. So, but go ahead.
With technology now, right? Anytime you do anything like that, it's logged and recorded.
It's
Well, with
documented.
facial recognition, it would be the same thing.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, let's adopt the technology and let's determine when it makes the most sense to use it. But let's not avoid the technology just because you think that somebody's going to use it wrong. No, if somebody uses it wrong, then we address it.
Get the
and they get in
policies in
trouble.
place and punish.
It's about the policy. It's less about the technology. It's more about the policy.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're headed towards, and by the time I retire, they won't be robot police.
This is eventually going to get like Demolition Man. Remember that?
Exactly.
Remember Demolition Man? Where you can-
Seashells.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You've been fined for cursing
Yeah.
when he runs out of toilet
But
paper.
But I mean, you still have to have that human element involved in it. We have it with red light cameras, with license plate readers. It's, they're not there. It's your car. Like if we're looking for, and we enter a tag into a license plate reader and we're looking for it, it doesn't automatically just issue the person's warrant and stuff like that. We use it as an investigative tool.
Right.
So it still has to run through a person or a human
Yeah.
being.
Well,
it's just making it faster to affect that justice and put that criminal away or catch that criminal so that we can move on to other cases and
It's like like AI. AI is not sentient yet, and there's a lot of people say that it will eventually, but at the end of the day, we're using AI because it's processing power.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a human typing in the prompt. It's a
Yeah.
human typing in the the inquiry.
Yeah.
And it should be the same with facial recognition and everything else.
If it's available, why not use it for the betterment of society?
Right.
use it for good.
If it's available, why not use it if it's going to help? We're investigating something that happened. Why not use every resource we can to find out the person who did
Exactly.
it? So, and then that would also be good with the street racers, those takeovers that you're going to get. Those you could get their tags and see who's out there.
Find a way. If I had it my way, find a way to look at their VIN and shut off the car.
Hey, how about
You
this?
got to figure that out.
Hey, how about this? And to go off of your thing about the human thing, and I see a need, feel a need, right? So this is what I have a whole video on this thing, but I'm going to sum it up. It is human officer goes altercation. Human officer shoots. Unfortunately, the suspect loses their life. Is what it is. People are mad at human officer because human officer thought he was going to lose his life. And now human officer, and there's a big thing, and vice versa. You got human element in there. I was scared for my life, so I had to use force. All right, what about we have now robots that are controlled by human officers? And the subject with a warrant wanted for homicide, and you have a warrant, you must come with. It's just a robot. Hey, get the robot. This is like Bomb Squad. They blow things up, and they lose a robot, replace a robot. And now you don't have that human element where there's nobody in fear for their life. That guy just got another charge because he damaged this property of the police department. But I foresee, because it's already there in some form, and Miami-Dade, correct me if I'm wrong, got a little doggy not too long ago.
Boston Dynamics dog.
A little robotic dog. So I'm not saying that robots are going to take over the world, but as we see a need for more officers and that need not being filled, we have to start figuring out other solutions, because no matter what, crime is going to crime is going to continue. And if you have things like street takeovers and things like that happening and things are popping up, we have to figure out how to stop this stuff. But that's just my little 2 cents. I have a whole video. If you guys go to YouTube, if you
I've seen iRobot before.
Right.
it's not iRobot.
That's a
I
good
think
movie.
the idea of not being able to fill academy classes and all that, I think that's temporary. I think we go in circles, right?
Pendulum.
Yeah. I think it's just we're at that part of the swing right now, but I think leadership is going to make a difference on getting more people in. Leadership is going to make a difference on getting more people to stay, right? And yeah, I think it's just a temporary thing. I think give it a couple of years, and I think we'll be back to where we can't, we're turning people away.
Have you seen it ever in the opposite direction? Have you ever seen it like this before?
In my timeline, not as bad as it is now.
Yeah.
Right. Because we have two things. We have two phenomena, right? Number one, nobody wants to be a cop anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And they're scared of it. And then number two, even the people that do have a past or have something in their, in their past that doesn't allow them to get hired. And so so what do? Do we not hire anybody, or do we lower the standards? And that's all,
It's dicey.
very
Slippery
very,
slope.
very slippery slope there, right?
Yeah. So it's just interesting. Being in the career, and I've seen when you got to turn people away, and you've seen where you got to say, "Hey, anybody, want to be a cop?"
Right, right.
I haven't been here long enough, or been in the career long enough to see it go both ways. So I was just seeing if I know there was a time. It was a time before my time that there was a grant for officers, and there was a hiring onslaught, and that's actually when the river cops got in and everything, and things started going where the standards got lowered.
You want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
I have a friend who who applied for the police department because he was skipping school in a mall. This is a true story. I won't say his name.
How does that go?
So they had a booth,
Yeah.
right, and it was during that that.
Oh, okay, so they're out there
early 80s
recruiting.
thing. They were doing a recruiting table, and these kids were skipping school, and they're walking around, and the officer looked at him, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And the kid didn't know what to say, and he said, "I came to apply. I heard you were," and he filled out the application only because he didn't want to get in trouble for skipping school.
Did he become
He became a cop, one of the best cops I know.
but not from that application or from that
Yes, from that application,
Hey,
which is the funniest thing.
But he's quick on his feet.
Hey, listen.
Right.
He's a critical thinker.
Yeah,
That's
he's one
why-
guy for many years.
I think it takes somebody with wolf blood to catch a wolf, and
Right.
if you're a sheepdog, if you're a canine,
Mm-hmm.
it's in you. So you have to be able to understand that, but know that there's a line. But
Right.
if I was doing it, I would do this.
Right.
And then it takes it. That's a good cop. It's a good street cop
There's
too.
it's a part of that.
Yeah.
My uncle, I had an uncle. He worked for the city of Miami. And I lived in New York at the time. I'd come down and we're in the beach one day, and I idolized him. Every time I'd see him in uniform, I'm like, and so one day I asked him, I said, "Hey, what's the first step in being a cop?" And he looked at me and he says, "You have to be a delinquent first." And I'm like, "All right, I'll take care of that." So he threatened me after that.
Yeah.
It was just a funny.
Yeah, it's
interaction.
just you have to understand. You can't be naive. And
Right.
You have to have some street awareness. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
Let's call it that. And so we'll leave it at that. So last thing is the Miami-Dade Police Department no longer going to be called the Miami-Dade Police Department once 2024 hits?
Correct.
This will be now the
Yeah.
Miami-Dade County
So-
Sheriff's.
Yeah, Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
So, remember, a lot of people don't realize that nothing really will change as far as responsibility with the department because we've always been the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed is the selection of the agency head. That's the only thing that changed. But if you look at our badge still says, and my deputy card says deputy sheriff, and my badge says Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. Right. So the only thing really that's going to, and all the constitutional responsibilities are still intact. We still have all those services. Right.
Yeah.
But the only thing that's going to change is the way that the sheriff now, instead of a director, the sheriff is going to be selected. And that's going to be by election.
So does that mean new uniforms? Because typically sheriffs are green and white, white and green.
Yeah. So I think the Florida Sheriff's Office has the uniform. They're the one that dictate that. I don't know if you heard, there was an old rumor that's been going around that I learned this in the academy, that Miami-Dade County pays a fee.
That's what I was
Yeah,
going to ask.
I know.
Fine, and so I heard that's not real.
Okay.
It's never
All
happened.
right.
But there is some kind of authorization memo that's signed, right, that they need to get approved. So that's come up a lot. I got to be honest, I haven't paid a lot of attention to that because to me, my view is the private and the public safety.
Yeah.
If legally we have to go to it, it's a uniform. I'm not, and I have mixed feelings about it. I do. In one
Tradition,
way,
right?
it's the tradition. It's the uniform I wore for 27 years. It's the uniform I aspired to wear. I think it's really meaningful for people who have worn it. You know what I mean? And I think the Miami-Dade community, the community at large, remembers that in Miami Vice. They remember that uniform. So there's a lot of tradition there. But on the other side, there's the idea that we've been kind of marginalizing, or we've been, I use this instead of them to us. We've been marginalizing the importance of the Florida Sheriff's Association, right? And kind of defying that by getting that memo every year. So, but it's really going to come down to a lot of things. It's going to come down to budget. It's going to come down to what in reality is necessary.
Yeah.
But I would really look at how it's going to affect not only the rank and file and the morale, how it's going to affect the relationship with the Florida Sheriff's Office and Florida Sheriff's Association, and how it's going to affect the public who may not want to see us. But I do think that there is a percentage of me that feels that the Miami-Dade community voted for an independently elected sheriff. They want to see a change. And so there's a side there that the public might want to see the change and know that it's a different department with a different structure and a different uniform.
All right. Fair enough.
So, but budget and everything is gonna dictate a lot of that.
Are you guys going to go back to Metro-Dade?
I loved Metro-Dade. I came on with Metro-Dade.
Metro-Dade, right?
Yeah.
Why did you guys, well, the county changed, but why did the county change?
So it was former Mayor Alex Pinellas. And what he mentioned, I remember, I think he said it publicly, but I remember hearing this, is that he felt that when he travels and he says Metro-Dade, nobody knows what Metro is. It
Yeah.
could be Boston, it could be New York, it could be anything.
For those listening, what year was you about? Would you say?
Man, I want
You
to
say you get decades, 90s.
I want to say early or late 90s.
So late 90s, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Around that time, the county of Miami-Dade County was actually known as Metro-Dade County. So that's what if you're keying in, like, well, what are they talking about Metro stuff? Yeah. So yes, it was Metro-Dade. And then you were talking about he came in and changed it.
The mayor came in. I want to say he was pretty newly elected at the time, if I remember correctly. But I remember him saying that when he travels and he says he's from Metro-Dade, nobody really knows where it is. So he wanted to make it more targeted towards Miami. So he wanted to change it to Miami-Dade, and that's where the change came.
All right, so there you go. So you got obviously when there's like we were explaining with
97.
There you go,
90s.
late 90s. So he was late 90s, and I tried to give you a little cushion by saying early 2000s.
My search terms weren't. It was telling me how to change my name.
Right.
And I was,
So just so you know, that we're explaining that if you don't tell the story, then people just assume and they put in what makes sense, and we're like, well, they're trying to be like Miami police because nobody knows us, and they're trying to be like us. They're trying to take our street cred.
Yeah. At the time, I remember not liking it because so I came into Metro-Dade, and I remember being a kid. There's Miami and there's Metro.
Yeah.
That's what and for years we kept calling it Metro.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking that it sounds too much like the school, because anytime I heard of Miami-Dade back then, it was, what school do you go to? Miami-Dade.
Yeah, Miami-Dade.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so fair enough. And so that means if it does change, the cars stay the same, the green and whites.
Yeah, I think the cars will stay exactly the same because the new cars lend itself.
Yeah.
Remember, it's always been green and gold. So the cars will pretty much stay the same. I think the only thing that'll change is the word from Miami-Dade Police to Miami-Dade Sheriff.
How about this one? So if you're not familiar, so sheriffs wear stars, right?
Right.
So although you guys, like you said, you guys get a memo that you're, because you go by Miami-Dade Police.
Right.
And technically you're not police, you're sheriffs, right?
Right.
So deputies or whatever. So are we going to a star because the police is usually a badge, right? How would you describe like a tin?
Shield.
A shield.
Right.
All right. And it's not a star. Sheriffs have stars, but in your badge there is a star.
Right.
There's a sheriff star in the middle.
I didn't know you knew that, but I was going to tell you we do have a star.
Yeah.
So I'll start by telling you, I think that's one of the things that that's relevant to the uniform, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if from a legal standpoint we have to. I can tell you I love our badge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love our badge and I love our uniform.
So you're a tradition guy.
Yeah, I do like the tradition. I think a lot of people put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to that, and I think it makes a big difference. But I also realize that the electorate of Miami-Dade, right, want to see a new department. They want to see a new structure. They want to see a change. They voted for change, so they're going to want to see the change. So I think it's one of those things where I think I got to do a little more research on what the legal requirements are going to be.
Yeah.
I do love our badge.
Yeah, this is just like little questions, little fun questions that I'm
to go back to that, what you mentioned is true. The sheriff star is a star, but our badge has the star within it.
Yes.
And so I don't know from a legal point of view if it or from the Florida Sheriff's Association point of view if it's described of if the description fits the criteria for their requirement.
I get you.
Yeah.
And I see where you're going with that.
Right.
Does it have to be the shape of a star? It just says star. I got a star right here.
I want to look and see if Jacksonville has
The
a star in there.
dot of my eye in Miami is a little star.
Right.
So
Like I said, I'm open to both. It's going to be a budgeting issue. There's going to be. I don't want to dig my heels in the ground on any of them.
No.
Only because I'm open to both. I think there's validity behind both.
Yeah.
And
it is good. And then let's say everything has to change. That's going to be a lot of money when it comes to uniforms, striping on cars, new badges. That's going to have to come out of something.
I've already thought of that. I mean, if we have to change, and again, if we have to change, I already have a plan set up on how we're going to do it.
And that's good. Having a plan is good because I would imagine that it would be like phased out almost like.
Right.
And a new fleet of vehicles come in. Like it's not going to be everybody changes. It's like little by little things will change until 5 years now or 2 years down the road. It's all different.
Exactly.
With that being said, You got anything you want to add? Anything like we're here towards the end? We didn't take another break because we were just rolling with it.
Yeah.
But is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to put out there? We'd love to have you back. First.
No,
and foremost.
I'd love to come back. This was actually really fun. I'm a little hungrier now by staring at those donuts.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure
They're
that the
fake.
public understands we're only in Dunkin' Donuts because we want the coffee. We're not really there for the donuts.
Yeah, they're from the donuts. Actually, we had a whole story behind how the donut thing started, but shortening it up, it was donut shops were open late at night.
Right.
Nowhere else to go.
Exactly.
Officers would go to get something. But
I'll tell you just a real small story. We right after 9/11, I was in SWAT in SRT at the time, and we had to get hazmat certified. And so we had got hazmat certified with a group of chemists. It's a chemical company, and they did the class. But what's kind of funny about it, you could put 30 SWAT guys in a room, and every morning the chemists would bring Dunkin' Donuts and coffee, and not one person ate the donut. Right.
Yeah.
And so I remember the guy saying, like in day 4, the guy says, "We're bringing donuts every day. What happened? You guys are cops." But you know, these are fit guys.
Yeah.
Not me anymore, but back then. But I remember, you know, when you're doing a hazmat, they're showing you all the combinations of chemicals that can kill you, and there's a lot of household chemicals that do it. And then at the time, I remember he even mentioned even bananas have radiation. And right then and there, I'm like, and I stand up and I walk towards the donuts, and the guy turned around and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, according to you, we're going to die anyway, so I might as well eat the donut."
That's good.
So
Yeah.
after that, in our team, we'd end up saying, "Hey, man, eat the donut." You know, and that became
It's better than a banana.
right.
That's
That's
very-
good.
it's-
Power rings, as they call them on.
Very true. Yeah, I
does
went
it
a
like a
long time where I was like, I never ate a donut in uniform, and now obviously I've become a bit more on the ridiculous side.
Right.
But it just,
Leaning into it.
as long as they're good, you cut it in half, feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
If you eat it fast, you don't feel as bad.
Oh, that's the Krispy Kreme motto. If you eat the whole dozen quick.
All right. Anything you want to add to the
No,
audience?
I think thank you for having me. I think
Yeah.
this is important for people to see. Like I said, it's the first election in 60 years.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and this is just my bit on it. It's important that we have somebody in the office that has experience, but not just office experience, not just behind a desk, not just administrative stuff, but somebody who's been out there with boots on the ground in many different environments, in many different settings, right? And that knows policing inside out. At the end of the day, it's about public safety, and we gotta put somebody there that's not scared to say it how it is and to protect our public. Because, like I said, I've got a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I think it's an important time for us. We're at a crossroad right now. I say all the time, Miami, I think, is the jewel of the state of Florida, and we're not going to allow it to turn into Atlanta. We're not going to allow it to turn into San Francisco, New York, any of those. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Thank you for coming. And best of luck. Oh, you got the. He just got the.
We gotta get the mug clink
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, because I went over.
Makes it easier.
We got to get a proper handshake over with them. But anyways, thanks for coming, Jay. You got anything?
Good times.
All right, looking forward to it. What do you got? You were gonna.
I was just going to say that if you want to follow the campaign, if you want to help and support and donate and contribute, the website is www.marioforsheriff.com, Mario for Sheriff on Instagram, and Mario for Sheriff on Facebook.
For sure. So if you're not following, make sure you go follow. And again, thank you for coming.
Yep. Thanks. Good times.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Calling all units, calling all units. Donut shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.